That does it for us. The Weeknight is up next.
Good evening and welcome to the Weeknight. I'm Luke Russert with Simone Sanders Townsend and the great Michael Steele. We're following several breaking stories tonight. Donald Trump is spreading new election lies as the man he is tasked with looking into rigged elections. Well, he purges staff from the intelligence agency that he now overseas.
Also ahead, new reporting is raising doubts about the president's unsubstantiated claims that vandals sabotaged the reflecting pool. Plus, we have exclusive footage from behind that tarp over the Kennedy Center.
And later, the Senate, for the first time, folks, it passes a war powers resolution, amen, hallelujah, in a massive rebuke to Trump's war with Iran. Senator Tim Kaine, who led this effort for months, joins us at the table. But folks, let's begin with breaking election news. Polls just closed in South Carolina for the state's Republican primary runoff for governor. Ali Velshi will break down those live results for us later in the hour. Also breaking tonight, Donald Trump is, once again spreading those election lies. He's just a short time ago in Pennsylvania running his mouth. State that Joe Biden won in 2020. Well, here's what he said.
That we had a rigged election. They cheat like hell, but we won it by a lot, and maybe we should run again. Should we run one more time? I'd like to do that.
Did you catch that last part, Simone?
I mean, I caught it, okay? I clocked it, Michael Steele. Quote, maybe we should run again? Trump is openly musing about an unconstitutional third term after he installed a loyalist as acting director of national intelligence and tasked him with looking into, quote, rigged elections. And Bill Pulte already carrying out Trump's order to downsize the office. A senior White House official tells MS Now firings are already underway. And we're still working to confirm the scope of those cuts. And, Luke, it's not clear yet who's been fired.
No, it's not. But meanwhile, the president is also ramping up his attacks on the First Amendment. We know that for sure. The Washington Post reports that Donald Trump's Justice Department subpoenaed national security reporters, at both the Post and Wall Street Journal. The DOJ dropped those subpoenas after the papers challenged them. This comes after Trump accused the New York Times of treason for fact-based reporting on the Iran war and threatening to sue ABC for their reporting on the green mess at the reflecting pool. And just today, here's how Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche snubbed reporters when they tried to ask him, quote, off-topic questions at a news conference.
And then just an off-topic, if I could.
No off-topics.
He gets to ask his question on the topic that he chooses. One of your spectators said.
Mr. Attorney General, will you take one off-topic question?
No. You got to take an off-topic.
Any other questions?
Sir.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Tonight, Mary McCord and Scott McFarlane are with us at the table. It's a good night for MC guests right here at our table.
I have a question. Simone, I
used to answer people's questions. I used to answer folks like Luke. I used to answer their questions.
I asked them, you answered them, and then she had to answer them for you. That was what the old jobs were.
This is good.
You learn as a principal, you just don't answer the question, which is what you did here. What is this deal about off-topic questions?
It's not even that he didn't answer the question. So first of all, I had not in a while ever heard reporters in any of the pools from the White House press pool or the DOJ press pool or the Pentagon press pool, frankly, stick up for another reporter when their question has been brushed off. So that caught my ear today. So E for effort. Somebody was like, isn't it A for effort? I'm not passing out A's. E for effort here. I never in my entire career was asked if someone could ask me an off-topic question. They just ask off-topic questions.
Right, that's a Justice Department thing. My time on the Justice Department beat, the press corps, as a courtesy, announces it's an off-topic question before unfurling the off-topic question. I wouldn't do that, and they never called on me after I didn't do that. I mean, the off-topic question warning is something we should just employ in life, like with our kids. with our neighbor. No off-topic questions for Dad.
There
Dad
were-
is focused on the priorities of the
Those
day.
do not exist in Congress. I
Actually,
can tell
my kids
you.
would love that.
You didn't have
No. I remember there was a women's suffrage event, and I asked Nancy Pelosi about some committee chairs that were angry at her, and she looked at me very angrily, but she answered the question, sort of saying, "Hey, time and place." Well, if you're a reporter, time and place is 110% of the time.
Yeah, Matt, absolutely. Look, I just think in this day and age, I mean, all the stories we're about to talk about, this is not a quote-unquote normal administration. This is also not an administration that has shown it cares 1 ounce about giving respect to the people that cover them, let alone respect to the American people and our tax dollars. And so I applaud the journalists at the Justice Department today, but I would just offer up that maybe we got to put the off-topic question courtesy in our pocket for the next couple of years, because
do.
these people don't respect you. Just ask your question.
Just ask your question, and so let's get into the topics.
Let's ask some questions to the MC.
Well, ask some questions. So, Mary, I'm curious your thinking as you continue to watch this current episode of the DOJ, and what are your concerns that emerged when you watch the whole process around the ODNI, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the firing of seasoned, professionals. We don't know who they are. We don't know why they were fired. There's no clear record of any violation of protocol or process inside the DOJ. What are you hearing? What have you seen? And what do you think this means?
Yeah, so, I think a lot of people don't probably really remember why we have the Director of National Intelligence, right? After 9/11, the 9/11 Commission found that some of our intelligence agencies just really weren't talking to each other, right? They weren't sharing information with each other. And the idea of the Director of National Intelligence is, let's get a person who's doesn't feel any particular loyalty to any one agency that can accumulate the intelligence, surface disagreements between the intelligence agencies, work those out, and be able to deliver a better product to the president, not just in the immediate aftermath of 9/11, but every day, right? The president's daily brief. And so that's the reason for it, because not only were they not talking to each other, but sometimes disagreements weren't getting surfaced. And that means you're not getting the best information. Now, of course, this president doesn't want any disagreements with him, so it really doesn't matter. But like in a normal world. And so the idea of maybe it's gotten a little too big, I don't know, but Tulsi Gabbard has already fired 40% of the people. So it's obviously already shrunk down a lot from where it is. But to think about just, having somebody like Bill Pulte, who has not one day's worth, I mean, I guess he has yesterday's days worth of national security experience, no relevant experience whatsoever, doesn't know these people, doesn't know the organization, doesn't know where they come from, what their expertise is. How is he going to engage in firings already, right? Who is he going to be firing? The only thing I can think of is what we saw with Tulsi Gabbard. People who, maybe he gets reported to him are disloyal or going to be pushing back on things he might want to use or misuse intelligence to try to justify.
And Scott, this is not some grandiose liberal conspiracy to get rid of Bill Pulte. He is somebody who both sides on the Hill want to get rid of. I think are both fearful of, because his presence does, according to people I've spoken to in national security circles, does increase the risk of attack on the United States. He is so woefully unable to carry out the needs of that position. Tom Tillis had a very colorful way to describe Mr. Pulte today. I'd like to play that.
My guess is, based on his past experience, it's just going to be another hot, steamy pile of Doge shit. I think he's incompetent sycophant and not the right person to lead DNI.
Incompetent sycophant, Doge, yes. But Scott, the question goes is, obviously he's sitting now in the position unconfirmed. I don't think he'd have the votes if it came to that. He's sort of in this weird gray area now. Do you think that the Republicans on Capitol Hill, like the Tillises of the world, like the Bill Cassidys, the Murkowskis, will they flex their muscle a little bit here?
It's more than just them, Luke. We've been going far and wide to find a Republican who will champion Bill Pulte, and I will let you know when we find one. We're still looking. Lindsey Graham over the weekend equivocated on this and begged off supporting Bill Pulte on Face the Nation. Lindsey Graham is up for re-election and arguably the most loyal senator to Donald Trump right now. That's an indicator of where things are. Bill Pulte, according to Andy Kim, the Democratic senator from New Jersey, who has a national security background, is to Senator Kim a hatchet man who was brought in to execute these firings. But you fire people from the intelligence world at the peril of the country. And as Mary says, you want to have a vibrant set of opinions in the intelligence space. You don't want to have sycophants, or we're all less safe.
You know, I think I have heard ever since folks started talking about the Pulte firings and whatnot over the last, it feels like, week or so. I've heard a lot of people that I really respect in the national security, legal intersection space say, well, maybe the DNI has gotten too big. Perhaps they should downsize. Maybe we don't need it anymore. And I would encourage those people, just like the folks who say, well, this indictment, don't run too quickly about what is happening with Gavin Newsom or the First Lady of California because we don't know the details. If the president orders a hit, whether the hit be on the governor of California, whether the hit is on Lisa Cook at the Federal Reserve, or whether the hit is on the career staff that populate the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, it has then officially been politicized. And so we can't have a conversation like regular people anymore about, well, maybe that is not what this is about, folks. America, the president is trying to steal an election. Am I being too dramatic here, people?
The election issue is, I think, the most prominent concern I'm hearing. Senator Mark Warner, top Democrat on the Intelligence Committee, he has some equity in this, said that the impact on elections would be immediate and can be immediate. We don't know what's happening, obviously, inside these 18 intelligence agencies or how Bill Pulte is mechanizing his position to distort things. And Senator Warner warns we may not know for quite some time the damage that's been done on the front of election integrity.
And, you know, it's not the DNI's job to, you know, police elections, right? To the extent that the DNI has an interest there, it's really to talk about foreign interference in elections. And, of course, we've seen that before in that reporting, and depending on whether it serves this president or not, it either is, you know, bunk or it's legit. But this idea that other types of, that the DNI would have other, you know, purview over elections, like Tulsi Gabbard being there the day that the search warrant was served in Fulton County, you know, that's just not part of the DNI's. We still don't know
why she was there.
We do not,
right.
But it's not a good sign.
No.
You know, I want to go back a little bit to the journalism piece here, because I really appreciate what, you know, how Simone sort of set up this this conversation in this space, because of your experience in the White House and how you would approach reporters and how they approach the White House. And certainly, Scott, in the work that you're doing day to day, and the other journalists at the table with Luke, you guys have a very interesting perspective on how the job is done. It did, I must confess, it really surprised me to hear that reporter say, you know, that yeah, can I get permission effectively to ask you a question that you're not prepared to answer? In other words, one that you don't know on the subject matter that we're here for. That's not been my experience with journalists. What does that say that exists in the first place, irrespective of, you know, I guess maybe it's the downward pressure of the Trump administration on the press, right?
But it's been a policy. Has it been a policy of the Department of Justice?
Or what?
My understanding during my time as justice correspondent for a network is that was a courtesy, a gentleman's agreement, for lack of a better phrase, used in the Department of Justice. I think it's time to disabuse ourselves of all gentlemen's agreements covering the Trump administration. That worked perhaps with Merrick Garland, perhaps that worked with James Comey, with the FBI, perhaps that worked with predecessors. Maybe that worked in the 20th century. But I don't think this is the administration with which we want to take gentle kid gloves to very serious matters.
Per what Simone noticed today, it was the first time that I felt that journalists were really backing each other up. And we need more of that. And when he says things like quiet piggy, treats female reporters with such contempt, such disregard, it's time to back up your fellow reporter, even if they don't work for your outlet, because the entire journalist estate, the fourth estate, has been under attack. Push back a little bit. And like, honestly, nothing bad's going to happen to you. You'll probably get a Profile and Courage Award.
Isn't that a better use of your time than asking the question?
Yeah. It's better being a stenographer. And I don't like telling journalists how to do their jobs, but I will say something. Back up the person next to you when they are in the fight against a regime that is showing autocratic tendencies every single day.
Raising my glass,
Hey.
Russell at the table.
Praise
Okay?
be.
You know what? There are other people that are fighting. I was shocked, but did y'all see this ad from the View about the View about this FCC campaign? If you didn't see it, we're going to play it for you right now.
I had this idea for a show. Different women, different points of view.
The View has welcomed your favorite guests and covered the issues you care about for nearly 30 years. Now, the FCC wants to control who is allowed to appear on the show. Viewers, use your voice. Scan this QR code. You have until July 6th.
Mary, I am old enough to remember when some very powerful law firms and some very astute, prestigious legacy educational institutions, when the president put a target on their back, they, as Michael Steele would say, bent over. Whichever way you would like to say they bent, I will leave that up to you all. But the View, some did, not all. Yes, there were about 4 law firms that decided to fight, and they won.
They won.
And so Disney now has a new CEO, and under this new CEO, they're taking a very, I would argue, rightfully aggressive approach. What do you think about this?
I think they should be. I mean, you know, the targeting, it's media, it's law firms, it's universities, right? It go on and on and on. And if you capitulate, what is going to happen? More targeting, fewer voices out there speaking, especially when we're talking about the media. I mean, this has all been an effort since the very beginning. You take these FCC investigations, you pair them with Trump's and others in his administration's just baseless defamation cases, but nevertheless settlements for some of those that were defensible cases. And it's all an effort to tamp down any kind of criticism. And if you don't stand up to that, and I applaud what they're doing. You know, they can stand up among themselves. They can maybe get other media like all of you to stand up for them. But to go to your viewers, your actual constituents, the people who watch the show, that's brilliant and that's important. And there's got to be collective pushback. If all the law firms would have joined forces with the 4 who stood up on day 1,
different situation.
He would not have gotten away. Trump would not have gotten away with what he did.
You can't win if you don't at least attempt to fight. Mary McCord, Scott McFarland, the MCs in the building. Thank you both very much.
Nice.
Stay with us, folks. In just a moment, there's new reporting that undermines Donald Trump's claim, blaming vandals for the reflecting pool mess. And later, breaking news: for the first time, the Senate has voted to block the president from resuming his war with Iran. Senator Tim Kaine, who's been leading this effort for months, will join us at the table. You're watching The Weeknight. New tonight, Donald Trump's explanation for his doomed reflecting pool renovation was falling apart. Government documents obtained by the New York Times, quote, do not indicate that the peeling blue coating and algae blooms were caused intentionally. Moreover, those documents show that Trump officials were publicly insisting the pool was pristine, even after workers were trying to address the deteriorating conditions. Also tonight, a first look behind the Kennedy Center tarp. It's a thing now. MS Now obtained exclusive footage confirming that the president's name has officially been removed from the building. Nothing there. Joining us now is Matthew Bartlett, MS Now political analyst and Republican strategist. Can I just say, I do think it's very ridiculous that the outlets, us included, have to chase down the story about the algae, even though we know it's a lie. But I am heartened by the fact that they are doing so with the vigor that a would-be autocrat deserves, and it helps me sleep better at night.
Well,
that and magnesium.
Listen, we said on the show last night, this is a important story. Because the way we are being gaslit as a country by this administration is at a level that we have not seen. Matt, I want to ask a question to you. Okay, this is from the New York Times, a headline. Trump says vandals sabotage the reflecting pool. Internal documents raise doubts. Neither the Interior Department nor the White House would provide charging documents, citations, or the names of anyone arrested. They did share the Park Police incident report, which they said any suspects were unknown. The report also did not mention any damage to the pool's blue sealant, nor did it describe any vandals dumping fertilizer. Now, we have seen video of the reflecting pool. There are dozens upon dozens of law enforcement officials down there. I've seen video of a truck that has all these surveillance gizmos on it. 300-foot gash done in this pool?
Yeah.
I mean, did the Loch Ness Monster do it?
Yeah, these vandals.
What's going on?
It's unbelievable, right? We got the National Guard out there. You got TV cameras everywhere, 24/7, and vandals come and cut a football field size.
What does it say that he's doing it to this level?
It's insanity. Not only is this a preposterous notion where you have algae, you see the liner floating up, but like you said earlier, why is this such a big story? Because the president has made it one. Because he cannot stop talking about it. In speech after rambling speech, event after unrelated event, he loves to talk about this. And so he set the stage for his own failure. Yet again, none of this is what the American people are talking about. It's what Donald Trump is talking about. And now you have this, again, algae bloom where he thought he was going to be having this beautiful reflection pool. It's part of this nonsense that has just been a stream out of this second administration.
You know, it's funny. I'm sorry. It's just stupid. It just is. Donald Trump is lying through his behind right now, and he knows it. And everybody gets sucked and warped up into this thing. First off, let me make it very clear so everybody understands. If y'all want to go and take a look at the reflecting pool, the monument, you know that tall obelisk that's over the that's away and over the reflecting pool? Guess what it's got? It's got a 24-hour camera there that you can go online and look and see the city at night, during the day, in the morning, in the afternoon, in the evening with your date. You can see if anyone is going there and sabotaging the pool. You can see if they're vandals because it's a 24-hour camera. Oh, Mr. Trump, by the way, it has been there for a while, so this is not something new. It has been there. So please, sir, would you, A, stop lying, B, stop gaslighting the country, and C, end the war. Bring gas prices down.
Something that matters to the American public?
I don't know. Come up with a health care plan. How about that? Repeal and replace. You know what that is. Well, come on with a replacement. There are a lot of other things you can do as president with a capital P that you clearly aren't doing. And this matter, as everybody at this table has noted, is important. Not because it's the damn reflecting pool, but because, again, this president is using it as a major distraction to go after voting, to go after not prosecuting the war that he started, and to, again, put Republicans in a position that not only will they lose the House this November, they all gonna get y'all ass whooped, okay? That's the street version of what's gonna happen in November. How do I know? Because I've been there in that room and I know what it looks like. And it looks just like this for Democrats.
I mean, again, everything you said is right. Sadly, to some degree, because this is the president of the United States. But some of this goes to this weird mythical notion that Donald Trump has this keen eye. He sees things that others don't see. He saw the reflecting pool and was going to he's redecorating the inside of the White House, this developer with this vision. Again, there is no vision for the country. And now it is just nonsensical beautification of a D.C. bubble. In this town, sometimes the cream rises, sometimes the scum does too, and sometimes the algae does as well.
Yes, it does.
You know, algae in Donald Trump's world, algae just can't be algae. It has to be sabotaged. You know, this is, as we discussed last night, it is reflective of the president's part of his governing philosophy, and it is part retribution, and also part criminalization of ordinary life, of ordinary politics. We've got a ticker on the side of the screen for the folks watching. It is election day in many places all across the country. I mean, the chairman just hit on it, but there are a lot of problems in the country. People cannot afford, like I was at the grocery store the other day. I went to the Whole Foods and I went to the Giant. It was expensive. And if I'm complaining about the groceries, I can only imagine how people across the country are complaining. This cannot be what Republicans want to be talking about right now.
Oh, gosh, of course not. I mean, again, elected on a frothy, stubborn, sticky economy, fix the economy. You know, I worked as an appointee in the first administration, right? We had a rocks-off economy. We always said, don't judge Trump on his rhetoric, judge him on the results. Right now, there are no results. At home, abroad, he wanted to build this legacy around international affairs. Guess what? Your legacy will be written by Americans and this economy and what you have done for them. And right now, unless your last name is Trump, I don't think anybody is doing well in this economy right now. It's a brutal reality that the president seems willfully blind. I was very, very hard on the Biden years and the Biden administration.
I remember, man.
Hey, arguably, they were at least trying. I'm not sure Trump is even trying right now. And we as a party, what do we have right now to take to voters right now? A ballroom, an arch, a Kennedy Center? It's preposterous.
But it speaks to a president who's asleep at the wheel. And we saw this today. He has that rally out in Pennsylvania with his core supporters, et cetera. And he's just going on and on and on and on about the greatest hits. No one wants to hear that music anymore.
Yeah.
And not in June of 2026. Because there are massive problems.
But to that point, real quick, Luke, because you made me think of something, because you're absolutely right. The people in that room, that ballroom, who are applauding, is that part of the illusion, or is that the delusion?
There is a certain segment of his supporters that will be with him for the rest of time because of the cultural issues. And they look at him and they go, what? I might lose my job. I might not have the same opportunities. Our country might be less safe. There might be problems in the streets. But I love how he sticks it to people that I don't like too. I don't know how you fight that. But I'm going to tell you what, when you have manufacturing is going down now, income inequality is at the worst it's ever been. All right, we have a stock market that's going crazy. I don't know how long that patience lasts for a lot of people, but 51% would seemingly go the other way.
Matthew Bartlett, it's always a pleasure to see you. Good to see you. Thank you.
Good to see you.
We have some breaking election news, folks. South Carolina Attorney General Alan Wilson is the projected winner in the Republican primary for governor. Now, both Wilson and his opponent, Pamela Yvette, were endorsed by Donald Trump. Ali Velshi will be at the big board for details with us very, very soon. And there is more breaking news. Next, the Senate, they finally rebuked Donald Trump's unchecked war with Iran. Senator Tim Kaine joins the conversation only on the weeknight.
Breaking news tonight. For the first time, the Senate voted to cut off the U.S. military campaign against Iran, handing a major loss to Donald Trump. 4 Republicans, Susan Collins, Bill Cassidy, Lisa Murkowski, and Rand Paul, broke ranks to help approve the War Powers Resolution to block further military action unless it's greenlighted by Congress. You know, the only branch that can officially declare war, that Congress. One Democrat, John Fetterman, voted against the measure. Joining us now, the man who has been leading this effort for months in the Senate, Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia. Thanks for being on the show, sir.
We're glad to be with you.
It's so good to have you at the table.
Michael, good to be back together.
Full disclosure. He says back together.
Chairman times 2.
This is the chairman's corner now. It's really nice to have him here. I want to start by quoting the New York Times and regarding the few Senate Republicans who joined with you in voting to check the war powers, noting what happens next is unclear. The measure was a concurrent resolution, a vehicle that does not need a presidential signature to take effect, but also does not become law. In 1983, the Supreme Court ruled that to have legal effect outside of Congress, legislative actions generally must pass both chambers and be presented to the president for signature or veto. This doesn't need Trump's signature, but it also doesn't become law. Times has got it right. Question-wise, what happens next? It is important from the visual, right? The vote and what that means and the effort that you and so many others put forward to get this measure in the first place.
Yep.
But help us understand what happens next.
So war powers has been my obsession since I came to Congress in 2013. And I faced off against my friend President Obama, President Trump term 1, President Biden, President Trump term 2, always saying you can't send our sons and daughters to war without coming to Congress. The War Powers Resolution vote that we had today is historic in this way. In the 52 years of this act, this is the first time that both houses have looked at the president and said, your war is illegal and you have to stop it. It wasn't just the Senate voting. We took up a bill that had passed the House and we voted for it. And so now both houses, Republican majority, have told the president this war is illegal and you have to stop it. There are questions because of this 1983 case that wasn't about war powers, it was about something else. Like, okay, does the president need to grapple with this? But here's my argument. If the president doesn't restart the war in Iran, this is a moot question. And I hope the ceasefire holds because the war was stupid and illegal to begin with. But if he does restart it, we'll be in court immediately saying the houses of Congress who have the power under Article 1 have both said the war is illegal. And in the court of public opinion, we'll say this, wait a minute. You're sending our sons and daughters into a war when both houses of Congress, with Republican majorities, have said the war is illegal. This is outrageous. So we've got a court argument and a court of public opinion argument. I think the next sort of legislative move probably goes over into the appropriations and defense authorizing process because the White House is up on the Hill now saying we need more money because of the Iran war, the supplemental or a reconciliation bill or a 40% increase in defense appropriations. We need more money. Wait a minute. Both houses have just said the war is illegal. So we'll move into an appropriations dollars discussion. But this vote today by both houses, Republican majority, builds a powerful argument for courts and also a powerful argument to the American public. Don't make our kids go into war that Congress has said is illegal.
You know, I don't want people to miss what you said about the next phase of the appropriators, because to be very clear, the reason the government has money is because Congress appropriates that money. Now, sometimes this government has decided to take money from elsewhere when Congress hasn't given them more, and that is a problem in and of itself. But is there actually an appetite from senators on the Hill of both parties to not continue to fund Donald Trump's war efforts? Because I think when we get into the territory of like, are we going to fund the military? People, they get a little squeamish. Because then it's like, oh, they don't want to look like they don't support the military.
Yeah, you want to give a pay raise for the troops.
Exactly.
Of course we want to do that, sure. Well, that's a really good question. And this is like, you know, Hill speak that you guys know.
But the people at home care. They're like, well, what's going on?
Like, there's appropriations and there's authorization. But bottom line, these things come together. And the Trump team has complicated it because they've sent us a request for a defense bill that goes through the appropriations process. But they've also said, but we want a supplemental bill too. And the news in the last couple of days is the Secretary of Defense has been briefing the Republican members in both houses about what more they want and not the Democrats. I'm on the Armed Services Committee. I hear there's an $80 billion extra request. Nobody's talked to me about
$80 billion?
$80 billion with a B. Nobody's talked to me about what's in it. And then and that's a supplemental request, and then there may be another request as well. So it's like they want us to vote on door number 1 without knowing what's behind door number 2 and door number 3.
Just give a $1 trillion budget to the Defense Department, Luke? I don't understand.
They've gotten a lot. They've gotten a lot. You know, I was looking back through files, and I actually interviewed you 10 years. I don't have the tape. I interviewed you 10 years ago, and you were same page on the AUMF, Authorization for Use of Military Force. Nat Kane, your son,
my oldest,
U.S. Marine, served as an infantry officer. Distinguished veteran now. He served. He served when you were running for vice president. Fortunate Son, that song. Well, Senator's son actually had some skin in the game. You had skin in the game. 13 service members have lost their lives in this
One
battle.
Virginian, Robert Marzon from Spotsylvania County.
Talk about the toll it takes as a parent when you know your son or daughter is in harm's way, and you know that that's being done without Congress's authorization. What does that feel like?
I was obsessed when I came to the Senate about war powers because I had watched Congress, I screw it up about the Iraq vote, Congress and the president. And at that point, I was lieutenant governor, like what power would I ever have? But when I came to the Senate, I said, listen, I am going to make sure before we send our sons and daughters into war that we do it the right way, not the wrong way, no shortcuts, follow the Constitution. And as I'm running that race, you know, just in the quirks of fate, like my oldest son decides he wants to be a Marine. So suddenly it was not just like I'm passionate because you got to follow the Constitution. I'm passionate because any kid that we're sending into war is just like my son. My son had 2 deployments overseas. Neither were in battle zones. There were some challenging deployments, not in battle zones. But, you know, if we're going to send our kids into war, I mean, Robert Marzon, the guy in Virginia who died, he was like 52. He had been deployed so many times. He was within months of retiring. You just can't shortcut this. You can't give a president. The framers would not allow George Washington to make this decision. They loved and revered him, but they said the stakes are too high in war to let one person make the call. And that's why Congress is supposed to weigh in. And presidents of both parties and Congresses of both parties have been willing to abdicate this. I ain't going to do it. I was governor during Iraq and Afghanistan. Too many of my Virginia Guardsmen and women were deployed overseas. I went to too many funerals, too many wakes, too many homecomings where the leader of the unit couldn't say all present and accounted for because they weren't all present and accounted for. If you're going to go to war, you got to do it the right way. That's what we owe to these heroic young people.
Senator, how do you look at, and this extension of Luke's question, and in one sense, how do you see 2027 when you know, ostensibly Democrats have control of the House, and I think with a greater degree of possibility, probability, the Senate itself, taking an issue like this and leveling it up to the point where it's more than just, you know, well, we're not sure, but, you know, we got this vote anyway.
So here's a couple of things, Michael. That's like a Rorschach question. I'm just going to tell you what comes to mind. When I came to the Senate in 2013, nobody was talking about war powers. Everybody now knows the war powers issue. It's like we used to go weeks at a time without thinking about the reflecting pool. Well, now everybody thinks about the reflecting. Everybody talks about war powers now. Here's my sense about 2027. I have a worry and I have a hopeful feeling. If the election works out in the way I hope, I think we will win the House, and I think we've gone from a 20% chance Democrats of winning the Senate to 45%, and the arc's in the right direction. So it's not 50% yet, but the arc's in the right direction. Say we win both. My worry, Donald Trump will go on a revenge tour for 2 years. That's my worry. My optimism, Donald Trump has literally the biggest zone of indifference of anybody who's ever been president. What he cares about, and he cares about a lot, you're not going to cross him easily on those few things he cares about. But most things he doesn't care about. Right. In his first term, I got tons of legislation signed by Donald Trump recognizing Virginia tribes for the first time. Mitch McConnell and I lowered the tobacco age from 21 to 18. The things that Donald Trump doesn't care about, you put a bill on his desk, he's going to sign it and say it's his idea. I never got invited to a signing ceremony, but he signed it and said it was a good idea. Right. So I don't want people to despair. We actually, like Donald Trump's going to sign this housing bill. This is, you know, Elizabeth Warren, Tim Scott, folks on the House. Yeah. There are things that you put them on Donald Trump's desk that maybe a traditional Republican might say, I'm not signing it for this, that, or the other reason, that he'll sign. So we're going to have to battle to stop the revenge tour, but we shouldn't miss the opportunity to just put good stuff on the guy's desk. And I think there's, you know, pretty good chance that a lot of good stuff we might put on his desk and he might sign it.
He might sign it.
Yeah.
Senator Tim Scott of Virginia.
Tim Scott. Oh, God. I have a bracelet that says Tim Scott 2024.
Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia.
They did that to me on Saturday Night Live, and he was just repeating the Saturday Night Live.
I love it. You called me. Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia. Thank you so much. You shouldn't have said Tim Scott there. Ahead, we'll get the latest primary election results from Ali Velshi at the big board. We'll get to it in just a moment right here on the weeknight. That was Tim Kaine. Tim Scott. Let's get back to the breaking election news. In South Carolina, a Trump-endorsed candidate just defeated a different Trump-endorsed candidate in the Republican primary for governor. MS Now chief data reporter Ali Velshi is at, you know it, the big board for us tonight. Go ahead, Allie. What's up?
Yeah, you put it well. You'll remember in the primaries in South Carolina, it was a very crowded primary for the governor. Pamela Abbott, who was a lieutenant governor, came in the top space. Two people who were notable losers in this one: Ralph Norman, a sitting U.S. Congresswoman, and Nancy Mace, Congressman, and Nancy Mace, sitting U.S. Congresswoman. So the two top performers made it to the runoff tonight with 8%, and we now have 17, but with 8% in, the Associated Press was able to project that Alan Wilson would become the nominee for governor, the Republican nominee for governor. Here's what happened. Pamela Abbott, the lieutenant governor, was endorsed by Donald Trump, but something happened. Wilson started to surge ahead in some polling that they saw, and Donald Trump, not wanting to be on the wrong side of that equation, also endorsed Alan Wilson. So both of them are Trump endorsed. Alan Wilson surged in the last few weeks and will be the Republican nominee for governor in South Carolina. We're going to have New York results probably in a little over an hour.
All right. MS Now's Ali Velshi at the board, man. We appreciate you. Thanks, Ali, very much. South Carolina, what do you think, guys? This governor going to roll back the clock, or what are we doing here?
Yeah, to be clear, it was a primary, obviously, but I mean, given the demographics of South Carolina, you never know until Election Day, but it is pretty likely that Mr. Wilson will end up being the governor. Again, maybe the people of South Carolina will surprise us, but this matters just like New York matters, not just because of the people of South Carolina or just the people in New York, but there are national implications here. I'm thinking about the fact that it was in South Carolina where Trump was pressuring the governor to do some redistricting, and it was members of the state Senate and some members in the state house that rebuffed Trump, and that is why Jim Clyburn's seat was not redrawn. Is this the governor that will take that up once he is inaugurated? What happens in New York? Mike Lawler's seat, whoever is going to face him, honey, that is a race to watch, Luke.
These are all important primaries because we're starting to see the lay of the land going into the midterms. And listen, we always get tasked with it being hyperbole. These are the most important midterms of all time. I don't know how else to say that. You want to be here to watch it? Be here with Allie, the best in the best. Keep your eyes on these races because we are going to see two things. One, what tact are the Democrats taking? I think this race in New York is getting all the attention. Is Jack Schlossberg versus George Conway, all that. Good on them to run. Some people are hating on them. Get out there and run. Good for you. But I think it's also going to be interesting to see what lane the Republicans go down. Because MAGA right now is somewhat of a tarnished brand nationally. In the primary space, still popular. And how MAGA do they go? South Carolina, it's going to go pretty MAGA. But these New York congressional races, the important ones, like the Mike Lawler one you mentioned, they have to walk a very tight line. It's not easy. You know what that line is like, Mr. Chairman.
We're going to be hearing the Marjorie Taylor Greene pivot, America first, not MAGA.
Look, I'll remind everyone again, the primaries are showing only 18 to 22% of the electorate who can vote. So you get what you get with 18 to 22%.
Get what you get. Coming up next, All In, Chris Hayes sits down with Congressman Ro Khanna. That's at 8 o'clock Eastern right here on MS Now. We'll be right back.
That does it for the weeknight, folks. We will see you back here tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois will join us on set. And be sure to follow us on social media at Weeknight MS Now. Don't you go anywhere because All In with Chris Hayes starts right now.
Tonight on All In.
Elon has worked tirelessly helping lead the most sweeping and consequential government reform program in generations.
The world's richest man wants a top critic jailed.
Elon Musk threatened to sue me, and he called on the Justice Department to put me in prison.
Tonight, Ro Khanna responds to Elon Musk and the legacy of Doge. Then,
I was sort of not going to do it, but he knew my weakness because I think Versailles is one of the great places. So I figured,
what's your weakness?
Like places like Versailles.
Senator Chris Coons on the Senate rebuke to Trump's war in Iran. And as voters go to the polls in Maryland, New York, and beyond, what tonight's big intra-democratic battles mean for the country in November. And All In starts right now. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. It is once again election night in America as voters in 4 states go to the polls in some key primary races, including here in the state of New York. We're going to have much more on those results as they come in later in the show. We're starting to get some from around the country, but we start tonight with a question. How will history remember the world's richest man? Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla and Twitter, became the first trillionaire in human history earlier this month. That's after his company SpaceX went public. And like Donald Trump, the man he has supported as president, Musk has a real talent for burying all of his most repulsive scandals by creating new ones. He's a businessman with a trail of false and broken promises. He's also responsible for hundreds of thousands of global deaths, possibly millions. I know that might sound outlandish or improbable, but stay with us here. Because as his wealth reaches new heights, Musk is now trying to retcon what may very well be, I think likely could be, his most lasting impact on humanity. His turn as the chainsaw-wielding head of the so-called cheekily named Department of Government Efficiency last year. Do you remember that? It actually happened. We all watched it happen. It wasn't a fever dream. Seems like it happened in another universe, but there it is, just over a year ago. Directing the slashing of jobs and programs throughout the federal government, as well as accessing and downloading Americans' personal info in violation of the Constitution and federal law. Even promising that their work, remember this, right, would bring Americans Doge dividend checks that never quite materialized.
A year ago, if someone had told you you'd be at CPAC and working with the president to absolutely shred the government, the swamp, whatever you want to call it, would you have ever believed that?
No.
No? Me neither.
But it's cool. This is awesome. It's money that's taken away from things that are destructive to the country and from organizations that hate you to you. That's awesome.
Does it seem, have you talked to
that's like
president?
glorious. That's like
It's the best.
The spoils of battle, you know?
Spoils of battle.
Say what you will, the man is charismatic. Now, the brunt of Musk's cuts, you might remember, fell on USAID, and that has been the federal government's main international relief agency. One, by the way, that was actually created by statute through Congress and authorized. That didn't seem to bother anyone when they destroyed it. It's also the aid agency through which Democratic and Republican administrations have staved off famines and prevented pandemics overseas and done a lot of other things. The cuts to USAID happened in such a chaotic manner that staffers who were laid off started to do interviews about just how crazy it was.
I haven't gotten paid since January 28th was my last day.
And you? Me neither. I actually got terminated twice. I was actually in Uganda when they shut down my access, disabled my account. I was still actually actively working on programming there and had to figure out how to get back.
Almost all of my colleagues have lost their jobs or will lose their jobs very shortly. And, it's not a natural place for a civil servant to be speaking so publicly, but all of the traditional channels for dissent that we would normally have, chances to engage with our bosses and our leadership to object or to explain the value of our work, I would say, have been taken away.
Now, to be very clear here, right, this wasn't some secretive program they did behind closed doors. This was a top story at the time. I mean, it wasn't like, oh, man, no one knew they were dismantling USAID. No. Musk went on publicly to spread wild and insane conspiracy theories about USAID to justify the chainsawing he was doing. He was claiming it was run by radical left lunatics who were fixing elections, saying it was, quote, time for it to die. He even suggested the people the agency helped didn't actually exist.
But many times over with USAID and other organizations, when they said, oh, well, this is going to help, children, or it's going to help some disease eradication or something like that. And then when we ask for any evidence whatsoever, I say, well, please connect us with this group of children so we can talk to them and understand more about their issue. We get nothing. They don't even try to come up with a show orphan, meaning like it's sort of like, well, can we at least see a few kids? Like, where are they?
Yes, the world's richest man wielding the power of the U.S. government saying, bring me just an orphan and throw him on the phone while he's in the middle of starving so I could tell if he exists and whether he gets to eat, okay? They do exist, by the way, of course. We'll have more on them in just a minute. Again, it happened in such a strange time in all our lives and feels so remote, it's difficult to recall just how chaotic and also unpopular Doge's work was. I mean, at the time, workers in multiple federal agencies protested after finding themselves just haphazardly locked out of their buildings. No explanation. I mean, I talked to a guy who'd like worked for the Parks Service for years and just got fired for no reason. He didn't know why. As Musk people moved in, gutted their work, cut their jobs, canceled their contracts. I mean, people engaged in work in dangerous places overseas, learned they were unemployed, and then had to find a way back to the U.S., as that woman who worked in Uganda mentioned. And while this was all happening, again, not in secret, Elon Musk bragged about it. He posted this: "We spent the weekend feeding USAID into the wood chipper." There's now a tremendous amount of rigorous data from a whole bunch of different people that have studied this, suggesting that in doing so, in feeding USAID to the wood chipper, those are the words Elon Musk used, that Elon Musk is responsible for the deaths of anywhere from hundreds of thousands of people to millions of them. That data comes from medical journals that have used statistical methods to estimate the total effects. It comes from news reports, of which there are many, record-keeping websites, most recently a new memoir by a USAID veteran who worked under 4 administrations titled appropriately Into the Wood Chipper. And all of this is newly relevant, not just because the world's richest man hit a new wealth milestone or because the U.S. government is becoming increasingly reliant on his companies, but because he is now trying to lie about this legacy and threatening a congressman who wants to investigate it.
There needs to be accountability for Elon Musk. You know, they're celebrating that he created 4,400 millionaires, but they don't talk about the 4.5 million children around the world who he possibly sentenced to death by dismantling USAID. He needs to answer for that.
That was California Congressman Ro Khanna, a Democrat who once gave Musk and Doge the benefit of the doubt. The Atlantic even called Khanna the Democrats' Musk whisperer early last year. But on Twitter yesterday, Musk posted, quote, "It's time to sue this liar." In another post, he called the congressman Ro the robber and said he should be thrown in prison. But that number that Khanna cited didn't just come out of nowhere. He didn't just make it up on the spot. It is from a peer-reviewed study by the Lancet Medical Journal that found, quote, "The Doge cuts to USAID could lead to more than 14 million additional deaths by 2030, averaging more than 2.4 million deaths per year. These deaths include 4.5 million among children younger than 5 years, or more than 700,000 deaths annually." And again, this all makes sense. The U.S. was spending billions of dollars doing things like giving people life-saving medication, particularly around HIV and AIDS, and feeding people who otherwise would starve to death. It's not like, whoa, how did you get that? No, there's lots of very, very poor and desperate people in the world, and one of the things USAID did was get them food and medicine at scale. So as Elon Musk jumped around with his chainsaw and bragged about wood chippers, experts and laid-off aid workers at the time were telling us very explicitly what would happen.
It's very clear that there are going to be huge, significant gaps. People are already suffering and dying as we speak because of this lack of aid that we took out of nowhere.
They have cut 80, 90% of the life-saving programming going on overseas.
At the end of the day, kids in places like South Sudan are still dying, still not getting their nutritional support, not getting their AIDS medication. And that fundamentally is what has to happen to keep people alive.
Again, he and a bunch of folks that came work with him, they pulled the plug on all sorts of programs with no warning whatsoever for the poorest and most desperate people in the world who are relying on it for everything from food to HIV medication. And then he walked away from it, and his space company went public. History will obviously remember Elon Musk's inconceivable wealth, but will it reckon with the human cost of his power? And Congressman Ro Khanna, that California Democrat who's in a war of words with Elon Musk, joins me now. First, I want to ask you about the calls to sue you and or jail you, and what your response is to that, if you've gotten any engagement from Elon Musk where he can sort of publicly try to defend his record.
Well, I'm not going to be intimidated by this guy. I'm less concerned about me. I'm more concerned that the world's richest person possibly sentenced the poorest people in the world to their death. And the reason that he's upset at me and suing me is because I talked about us taking back the House, subpoenaing him, and investigating him. I mean, the academic study I cited is a year old. These issues have been put on the New York Times. It's not like I said anything new. So why is he suddenly scared? He's scared because because he knows the Democrats could win back the House. He knows we'll have the subpoena power, and he finally is going to have to answer for these cuts.
That's a broader point. I mean, there's USAID and the human cost. And again, the Lancet study, 14 million additional deaths by 2030, averaging more than 2.4 million deaths a year. I know that number is just sort of incomprehensible, kind of scrolls past your eyes. 700,000 deaths annually, children younger than 5 years. You know, even if this were an order of magnitude off, and we're calling, you know, a tenth of that or 2 orders of magnitude off, 100 of that, we have never gotten any definitive investigation of what went on in those first few months of DOGE across the entire government. I mean, we know that it completely failed in its mission. It did not reduce government spending. We know lots of people had to be hired back. But there was an enormous amount of destruction that I feel like we don't actually have a comprehensive view of.
We have no view on it. Frankly, if you brought a lawsuit, maybe there would be discovery. But there were 83% of programs that were shut down. Then Congress, through the process of appropriations, actually restored some of them. But there still were dramatic cuts. Now, the Lancet study talks about the potential debts, but there was a study in Boston that Atul Gawande actually oversaw that talked about the actual debts from what USAID cuts did. And all I'm saying is there needs to be transparency. Musk never came before the American people and said, here is why I'm cutting these things. He never came to Congress. He just did it at DOGE, and it led arguably to huge devastation. And you know, now at least he's so ashamed of it. I mean, obviously, he doesn't want to admit that this could have been the consequence.
And you cannot be accused of being a longtime anti-Musk partisan. I want to read to you from 2 posts that you had on the Musk website of X. This is during the sort of end of 2024 after Trump had been elected, when this was getting set up. You said, I'm ready to work with @Doge, Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy to slash waste. I have a track record of doing so. I led the charge to get Transdigm to refund $16 million after investigator reporting exposed price gouging. Let's look to the Truman Committee and ensure Americans get their money's worth of DOD spending. And then you follow that up when people got very mad at you for saying you were going to work with them. X isn't always real life, but 23 million plus views is the most of any post of mine has had in 9 years in Congress. Might have benefited from the company that he owns and the algorithm. Millions of Americans want us to work with DOGE to cut wasteful spending. I am for spending money to improve people's lives, not wasting money. It's common sense. How do you feel about giving him the benefit of the doubt for this enterprise?
Well, let me just say now, a post has exceeded that. That's when Musk threatens to sue you and put you in prison. But I've known Elon Musk for,
that one has more views.
By far. But I've known Musk for a long time. I mean, he blurbed my first book on manufacturing. We worked when I was in the Obama administration on the Tesla loan that the Obama administration gave. I wanted it to have labor neutrality. And when Musk came to the administration, I've, as you know, Chris, been a consistent vote against the defense budget. I'm often the lone vote on the House Armed Services Committee. I think it's a bloated budget. And I thought, okay, here was someone who did take on the Boeing and Lockheed monopoly with SpaceX and Ash Carter, and maybe he could actually talk about cuts in defense. And so I said very openly that I was willing to work on it. It turns out that he did zero when it came to the defense budget, not a single cut, and he went on cutting USAID. And then he was totally unconstitutional and defied a subpoena, which we voted on oversight. And he started insulting me, but at least there was some back and forth. And now it's obviously a totally severed relationship, though I have said I'll debate him in public. Maybe I'll debate him on your show, debate him on wherever he wants to debate. Well, I mean, I want to get to the facts.
We would happily host that debate. I would welcome that at any point, particularly to air out what the record of DOGE was, which I don't think there's been an accounting for. You know, the final question I think here is about how compatible American democracy is with this level of concentrated wealth. You know, we talk about the robber barons, and we look back at Rockefeller and Carnegie. In real terms, in terms of percentage of GDP, depending on how you want to try to apples it, inflation adjusted, we're in an era now that surpasses that, and we're also in an era in which, you know, thanks to Supreme Court jurisprudence, unlimited spending on campaign ads, and you really start to have to wonder, like, This is a guy who was sort of fomenting an ethnic pogrom in Northern Ireland 3 days before he became a trillionaire. And it just seems like there's very little accountability for him or any of his ilk.
Careful, Chris, he's going to threaten to sue you. But the reality is, and you know the numbers as well as I do, 19 billionaires, this is Gabriel Zucman's work, 19 billionaires have the wealth that's equal to 12% of our economy. That's 3 times the wealth concentration of the Gilded Age. And it's not compatible because it's not just that Elon Musk is going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to elect who he wants. He fundamentally believes that if a member of Congress says that he owes the American people an explanation or that he should be subpoenaed, that he can just threaten them, to sue them, to put them in prison, that he has total impunity and that he has a bigger voice, not just in his political contributions, but as a person in our democracy than the other 330 million people. And you have a group of people who have hoarded extreme wealth and power, really, which is what Bernie Sanders has been talking about to fight the oligarchy. I now see it firsthand. I mean, he's trying to intimidate me. I won't be intimidated, but look at how many members say, well, I don't want to deal with this hassle. Let's just move on. I want to focus on constituent services. I'm just not going to speak up. I don't want a lawsuit against me.
Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Coming up, Senator Chris Coons on Trump's Iran deal disarray. That's next. We've got a call in one of the races tonight in the state of Maryland, where Governor Wes Moore has fended off a primary challenge. AP is projecting that Governor Wes Moore will be the Democratic nominee. Not a particularly surprising result. He has had a pretty good run of success in the state there. He will be the gubernatorial candidate for the Democrats in the fall as the incumbent. Meanwhile, yesterday, J.D. Vance announced with some fanfare that Iran has agreed to allow international nuclear inspectors back into their country.
This is probably what we're most excited about as Americans. The Iranians have agreed to invite IAEA inspectors back into their country. That is a major milestone for the American people and the first step in permanently denuclearizing or permanently ending a nuclear weapons program in Iran.
Great news, Vance said. The thing is, inspections of Iran's nuclear activity were happening regularly under the Obama nuclear deal until Donald Trump tore that up. In fact, they were happening with verification. After Vance's announcement, the Iranian Foreign Ministry rejected the claim, telling state media there was no plan for inspections of its nuclear facilities. Donald Trump then accused the Iranians of, quote, making false statements, posting that Iran has fully and completely agreed to the highest level nuclear inspections long into the future, infinity. I'm sure they've agreed to infinity duration nuclear inspections. You know the deal's a good one when the parties are accusing each other of lying about it.
The Iranians are saying there's no scheduled visit for the IAEA inspectors. Is that part of your agreement?
They're wrong. They're wrong. They know they're wrong. They told us inside, and we have it down, 100% inspections. And if they were right, I'd cancel the meetings right now.
Senator Chris Coons, a Democrat of Delaware, member of the Foreign Relations Committee, and he joins me now. Senator, you've quite a bit of experience in international relations. I have never seen diplomatic negotiations sort of live posted the way that these have been. And part of the reason I think for that, the sort of traditional understanding is there's this idea in these negotiations that nothing is agreed to until everything's agreed to, so that you don't produce a situation in which any incremental development can then be waved around by the other side. They seem to be taking the alternate approach. Maybe this radical transparency will be better or worse, but what do you think about it?
Chris, I don't think it'll be better at all. In fact, the idea that J.D. Vance is somehow declaring getting IAEA inspectors back into Iran is a big breakthrough belies the fact that, as you said, they were in Iran with broad access under the Obama-Iran nuclear agreement, the JCPOA. What's the difference? Well, we've spent tens of billions of dollars on Trump's war of choice in Iran. We lost 14 American soldiers. We had hundreds injured, and there's been tens of billions of dollars of damage to American embassies, bases, and facilities. And the average American has higher costs at the pump and for groceries as a result. And we will soon have higher costs for every person in America who's growing things as well as around the world as fertilizer costs go up. So President Trump has put us in this strange pattern where first he or J.D. Vance makes some big announcement about a breakthrough, then the Iranians denounce it, disagree with it, and then Trump stays up all night rage tweeting about algae in the reflecting pool. This is no way to conduct serious negotiations with one of the largest state sponsors of terrorism, a country that, as a result of Trump's war in Iran, seems to be ending up in unbelievably a stronger strategic position because they've shown that they can shut down the Strait of Hormuz at a time of their choosing.
The Senate today voted for the first time successfully for essentially a war powers resolution to block the administration from resuming the war. 50 to 48, 4 Republicans joined the Democrats to support the measure. There were 2 Republican senators who missed the vote, and John Fetterman, the only Democrat to vote with the Republicans. I guess at this point it feels slightly moot. I wonder what you think the significance is.
So look, Chris, having both the House and the Senate pass bipartisan resolutions that say this war against Iran was illegal and the president should withdraw our troops is not legally binding on the president, given the technical way it was passed. But what matters is it sends a strong signal that there isn't enduring bipartisan support for this war, and that, frankly, the president needs to be held accountable for having wasted so much time and money and effort on a war that ultimately didn't produce any of the different aims that he put out for it. Part of the chaos of the run-up to this war, Chris, was that President Trump announced first it was a war of regime change. Remember him saying help is on the way to the thousands of Iranian protesters who were later mowed down by their own government? Or this was going to be a war that was going to eliminate, obliterate any potential future nuclear program. But now they're announcing small progress in terms of inspections. Or this was going to be a war that prevented their support for proxies in the region, for Hamas or the Houthis or Hezbollah. Yet that issue appears nowhere in this 14-point peace plan. Or we were going to finally fully constrain their ballistic missile program. Also not mentioned in the 14-point peace plan. This has been a chaotic mess from the beginning and is a chaotic mess today. And the resolution passed by the Senate today on a bipartisan basis is simply a recognition that there isn't bipartisan support for returning to this ill-conceived war against Iran.
So if it's a signal, right, that resolution today, the real, to me, the rubber hitting the road is on the appropriations bill. We've now got a number attached. They're sort of telegraphing they're going to have $80 billion from Congress to the Iran war as a supplemental. Are you a yes or a no on that?
Well, I've said to Secretary Hegseth, I will not vote for a bill, a supplemental, that is a backdoor authorization for the war against Iran. So the war's got to be over. That fails to provide munitions and support for Ukraine. I care deeply about standing up to Putin and defending Ukraine's fight for freedom. And President Trump is almost single-handedly helping Putin in his war of aggression against Ukraine. And frankly, there's lots of other things that President Trump proposed in his defense budget, from his new Golden Fleet to this Golden Dome concept, that I don't support and I won't fund. So we haven't received the supplemental request yet. There are lots of Democratic priorities that I want to see us appropriate and spend for. So I think I should say I'm open to negotiations.
Yes, that's.
But I'm not going to support an $80 billion supplemental just to appropriate and authorize a war that I was never consulted on and I didn't support.
There is another set of actions the Pentagon's been taking in our hemisphere that I think have faded from the front pages and from coverage, and I include myself in this, but has continued on the background, which are these strikes in the Caribbean on boats. The legal justification, the Pentagon says, is that these are acts of they have a wartime authorization to kill people who are narco-terrorists. I think the vast majority of legal experts say that there is no legal justification. This is tantamount to homicide. I don't think that's a totally hyperbolic thing to say. We had another strike this weekend. This one, there were 8 people on the boat. 2 died, 6 survived. We don't know if they were rescued. is this just going to continue on in the background and it's just until Trump is left office?
Chris, thank you for raising that and for returning the focus of your viewers to this issue. There have been something like 210 people killed in the Eastern Pacific and the Southern Caribbean who are alleged to be narco-terrorists, but with very little evidence being presented to the Senate, to the Congress. And the idea that these are imminent and urgent attacks on the United States is belied by the fact that most of the trafficking that's happening north and east of Venezuela is actually heading towards Europe, not towards the United States. I've seen precious little evidence that suggests this is the sort of imminent threat that justifies the president using the same sorts of authorities that were used under presidents of both parties during the war on terror. I do recognize that drugs present a real lethal challenge to the American people, that we should be doing everything we can to interdict fentanyl, for example. But there's little proof that the trafficking in cocaine off the northeast coast of Venezuela is the same thing as deaths in American neighborhoods and cities and towns from fentanyl. And there are certainly less lethal ways that we could engage in partnership with our regional allies in interdicting drug trafficking.
All right, Senator Chris Coons, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Chris.
Still ahead, as we said, it's election night in America. There's a sort of, I think, somewhat interesting, I might even say comical result out of South Carolina that has to do with the much sought-after Trump endorsement. You went kind of different on this one. Ali Velshi joins me at the big board to explain next. Like we said, it's election night in America. There are primaries being held in 4 states, including some potentially consequential contests here in New York. Now, polls are open here for another 25 minutes, but they have closed in South Carolina and Maryland. MS Now Chief Data Reporter Ali Velshi is at the big board monitoring results as we see them. And let's start with South Carolina, which
we got to start with South Carolina.
It's a runoff, right?
It's a runoff for the governor's race.
Give us the background here.
All right, the background is before the runoff, when the actual primary date occurred, Pamela Evette, who's a lieutenant governor, had the most number of votes. She advanced to the primary. Her main challenger was Alan Wilson. He had just 2 points less. Ralph Norman, a member of Congress, did not make it to the runoff, nor did Nancy Mace. Okay, so now we get to tonight with 8% of the vote in, much earlier this evening. Now we have 55% of the vote in, but just 8% in, the Associated Press advanced Alan Wilson, who will be the Republican candidate. Here's the thing. Pamela Evette had Donald Trump's support, but after the consolidation of all these other Republicans who didn't make the cut in the runoff, it seemed that some sort of internal polling showed Alan Wilson doing better. And as a result, Donald Trump also endorsed Alan Wilson. So both candidates had the endorsement of Donald Trump. Now, what we are seeing, my team's looking into this, so I don't fully have it just yet, but it does look like Wilson is benefiting a lot from day of voting, which means that endorsement, the double endorsement by Donald Trump, may have actually paid off.
Well, so to be clear, so he endorses her in the first round.
Correct.
She does narrowly win a plurality of the votes.
Just a little bit,
First past the post.
Yeah, it's almost 13,000.
But Trump clearly, he doesn't care.
Yes.
He just cares about loyalty, and he cares like seeing a winner.
Yes.
So his team gave him some internal data. Is like, it looks like this guy might win.
He's winning, yes.
So go with him. And then they posted this. I think they posted this. Did they post this tonight? Can we post the after Wilson was declared Republican nominee for governor, Alan Wilson wins, endorsed by President Trump.
So was the other person in the race endorsed by Donald Trump. So that is an interesting little race that we're following. And as you mentioned, we're, of course, following the primaries in New York. Very, very interesting stories. Many of them are right here. Let me go in a little bit. Many of them are right here in Manhattan. The big races that we're looking at are here, District 10. This is Brad Lander challenging an incumbent, Dan Goldman. There have been 2 Democratic incumbents who have lost their seats in primaries so far this year, but in both cases, they were redistricted constituencies in Texas where an incumbent was running against an incumbent and somebody was going to lose. If Dan Goldman loses this one, this will be the first incumbent to go down from an actual challenger. District 7, this is an interesting one. Antonio Reynoso is endorsed by the Working Families Party and is friends with Brad Lander, who seems to be sort of having campaigned with him. Claire Valdez is one of 3 people, like Lander, who is endorsed by Zohran Mamdani. Not major policy differences between them. Reynoso is a progressive. Claire Valdez is a member of Democratic Socialists of America. So Mamdani is looking very closely at this race. And then District 13. This one is very interesting because you've got your incumbent, Adriano Espaillat, sort of the dean of Latino politics in New York, head of the Hispanic Congressional Committee. Daria Liza Avila Chevalier is challenging him, also endorsed by Zoran Mamdani. This is actually the one we're looking most closely at tonight because this is one in which they're running closer together in the polls. But if two incumbents go down tonight, that'll be very, very big news. It'll speak to Zoran Mamdani's power, or whether it's dissipated, and it'll speak to Hakeem Jeffries' control over things. So we're watching New York very closely, not just because it's New York, but because these currents are running through the Democratic Party nationally.
Yeah, in fact, we've seen these kind of primary challenges throughout the country. There's a big Michigan primary coming up.
That's a similar challenge.
Some of these dynamics we saw in Maine with Plattner and Mills. So
progressive, moderate, old, new,
exactly.
young,
a bunch of different sort of dichotomies that align.
We'll see how it goes.
That. All right, Ali Velshi, thank you. Still to come, the New Democrats challenging the direction of the party. That's next. In just a few minutes, polls will close here in New York. There are a bunch of fascinating congressional primaries that are reflective, I think, of broader coalitional battle unfolding in the Democratic Party at a time when it appears, particularly in American cities, like the left flank, the sort of progressive insurgents, Democratic Socialists of America, feels energetic and ascendant. The results tonight could be a preview of the contours of some of the fights that happen in Congress if Democrats retake one or both houses, and then the contours of that 2028 primary presidential race. Mayor Zoran Mamdani, incumbent Democratic Socialist, has backed a slate of candidates for some tightly contested races. They are effectively proxy fights for a bunch of long-standing factional battles within the Democratic Party. Will Democratic voters back young leftist challengers to replace longtime establishment figures? Will the party's urban left-wing base settle for traditional progressive candidates or demand committed Democratic Socialists like Mamdani? Will voters reject otherwise party standard incumbents over their outspoken support for Israel? They're all questions being asked tonight in these races, ones that will linger in the coming months as the 2028 Democratic field begins to take shape. Michelle Goldberg is an opinion columnist, New York Times. Lindsey Johnson's Democratic strategist, author of Flip the Tables, The Everyday Disruptor's Guide to Finding Courage and Making Change. And they join me now. It's good to have you here. You know, I feel like there was, during Trump 1.0, there's sort of, AOC wins this big primary, sort of slept on, kind of no one saw her coming. There was a bunch of wins for left, progressive, sometimes DSA-backed candidates across the country, including Cori Bush in Missouri and then Jabal Bowman and a bunch of others. And then some of that collapsed a little bit during the Biden years. We're now seeing it ascended again. How do you read this moment in terms of these sort of factional battles?
Well, I guess it worries me because I worry about sort of what lessons people took from the collapse the first time around. Yeah. The collapse, partly it was a fact of, Trump was no longer in office. The DSA in particular sort of thrived on that opposition. There was a lot of sectarian infighting over both Israel and also just sort of internal factional battles. And then Mamdani comes along and it seems like, there's this sort of new day for the left, right? And part of that is about kind of moving away from moving to a message that's extremely universal, that's extremely focused on affordability, that's kind of, that has a base beyond just socialist true believers.
Right, or the hyper, political hobbyist, full-time ideologues.
Right, and so I think that some of these contests are going to basically tell us, where is the left going? Is it going back into a more sort of hardline,
that's interesting.
The sort of hardline politics that we saw in the first iteration of the rise of the DSA, and also about how broad its appeal is beyond just the people who are sort of ideological allies of this of Mamdani.
One of the things I think is interesting right now is, in the case of Seattle Mayor Katie Wilson and Zoran Mamdani, it's one thing to be a legislator and be a vote. It's another to do the governing. And so with Mamdani's is a city of 9 million people. You gotta fill the potholes. You gotta clean. That brings a different texture to some of these battles as well, where you have people associated with that sort of part of the party who are also not just legislators but actually have to do the governing.
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. I actually want to pick up on something that you were saying about how people are so hardline in each of these factions of the left, right? And folks have been saying, you know, after the first Trump administration, there was a let's get to Biden because he knows how to govern. But then people kind of got tired of it because they said, oh, this feels like the status quo, right? And the reason that folks voted for Trump was because it was disrupting the status quo. They wanted something different. They felt like Biden was actually, you're just kind of like manning the ship, but not necessarily pushing for these policies. And that's what I think so many people are calling, you know, Mamdani. I don't live in New York City anymore, but like everyone is embracing him because there's this governance piece, but there's also this visionary piece, right?
So that's
the piece that people are looking for.
That, I think, is the really interesting question about this, what has become this sort of factional battle, and I've said this before in other contexts, is that a bunch of stuff has got stacked atop each other, right? So it's like there was a period of time where, like, you know, Bill Clinton coming out of this DLC was like the fresh-faced ideological vision were the, like, moderates and the sort of conservative Democrats. Like their whole thing was like, we're disrupting the status quo and like we're more pro-business or whatever. You really do feel like in these factional battles, there is this kind of vision vibrancy in the left part. And it's hard to say like what's on the other part of that in these factional battles.
Right. Well, and I mean, part of it is generational, obviously, right? There's a lot of anger at this kind of gerontocracy. There's also just a lot of anger at a Democratic Party that's almost sort of pan-ideological, but a feeling that they haven't fought hard enough or that they've been too complacent.
Yes.
You know, and so that's when you see, when I've been to, for example, rallies for Graham Plattner, you know, there's people who are very much on the left who are supporting him, but there's also just very normie Democrats who are really, really mad. What's interesting about some of these primaries in New York is that those different camps each have different candidates, right? So, you know, in some of these races, it's really the socialist versus the progressive, or, you know, or the sort of socialist versus, or the progressive versus the normie Democrat.
Yes, in Brooklyn, there's not that one Brooklyn race, Reynoso and Claire Valdez. This is not an enormous ideological difference between these two candidates.
Do you know the thing about this vision piece, and you also brought up this piece of voters wanting a fighter? They also want authenticity, right? And they want to feel this connection that someone's going to go to battle for them. I live in Virginia. There are a lot of Virginians who are a little disappointed in Governor Spanberger, right, and holding up some key legislation because they don't see that fight. Ironically, she ran on affordability, so did Mayor Mamdani, and yet they see a fight in him. They see a fight in some of these other candidates across the country.
Although he's also got a different median voter than Abigail Spanberger does. I mean, that's part of it too, right? For all of these people is everyone is, and this is where it's going to get super interesting. I mean, you've got a pretty progressive candidate who's going to run Forstag in Montana, who's going to try to run statewide there, and he was the kind of progressive choice in that primary, and that's a tough state to win as a Democrat, but they're going to kind of apply the theory, right? It's like, okay, I'm a progressive, and he's a smoke jumper, and he's going to go out and try to win that. And I do think, you know, some of this is just the experimentation. You kind of see what works.
Well, this is the theory, right? That kind of voters are all not that ideological on a right-left axis. There's also populist versus establishment. There's also insider versus outsider. And so the people who are saying, you know, this new outsider sort of Democrat can win. We're about to, I think, run a huge experiment with the fate of the Senate and maybe the House at stake to see whether that's right. But we've already seen that, you know, the sort of Democratic politics as usual has failed.
Yes, and I think in Michigan, Abdul Sayed, who's currently leading the polls, we don't know who's going to win there, but were he to win that, him and Plattner and Forstag would all be sort of examples of that. The other thing I just want to ask you, as someone who's been in politics a long time, I think that the current super PAC situation in primaries, I think it's just totally beyond toxic. Like, it just, the idea that like a small group, well-funded with like very narrow interests, whatever those are, in some cases like we want to destroy AI regulation, or we want to promote crypto, or we want to make sure that Democrats are, you know, incredibly pro-Israel, whatever they are, the way that this money is getting dropped in these primary races, I think, is just completely toxic to the politics.
Listen, I agree, but I'm actually hopeful in this moment because a lot of voters have actually gotten really smart with it, right? They're seeing the impact of that, of these like singular focused super PACs and how they've meddled in these races and giving them elected officials or candidates that don't reflect all of their interests. And so
yes, there's a price to pay for their support in these primary races.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we'll see, hopefully, in some of these primaries and throughout the midterms, whether or not they have the actual influence as much as they used to, because we've disaggregated the way that people are getting information. I mean, they're getting it on their phones. They're getting it directly to them. And so if you can break through some like super PAC money, and there are candidates that can with amazing affordability, amazing ability to connect on a lot of different issues, then who knows how, I won't say they're not going to be irrelevant,
we'll see.
But their influence might shift.
Although I also do wonder about what that money bomb is going to look like come October, when the AI people are all like, oh, okay, we want to nuke a Democratic House.
Oh, especially
like it's going to be
especially
ugly.
with all this uprising against the data centers from rural voters. So
Michelle Goldberg, Alencia Johnson, thank you both. Stay tuned. In just a few minutes, Jen Psaki will be speaking with Georgia Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock. We'll be right back. That is All In on this Tuesday night. The briefing with Jen Psaki starts right now. Good evening, Jen.
All right, Chris, there's a lot of politics to talk about, and we were going to talk about a lot of it. But there were dead ducks in the reflecting pool that is green and full of algae, and I am not a medical expert. I don't have any information on the autopsy, but it all feels very bad here.
That story just every day continues to just astound. I have to say, I spent way too much time trying to like read into the chemistry of the whole thing, and I did read from some people that do know about this that like peroxide is the least toxic thing you can put in there. It breaks down very quickly. So I don't know, but I can't imagine all that peeling rubbery stuff is good for the wildlife.
Me neither. We may never know, but it doesn't feel good. But good thing we have other good things to talk about. I appreciate you're always bringing some nerdiness to the convo. It's just delightful. Have a good night.
Have a good night.
Okay, as I just mentioned to Chris, there's a lot of politics happening. They've already been talking about it. You've probably been following it. There are primaries tonight in Maryland, in Utah, in South Carolina, and a bunch of hotly contested primaries in New York, where polls just closed at 9 p.m. Eastern time at the top of the hour. And we're going to bring you the results from all of those big races as they start to come in. Ali Velshi is, of course, at the big board. And we're also going to talk about what it all means for both parties heading into the fall. But tonight we got our first big result already out of the primary to be the Republican candidate for governor in South Carolina. And in that race, Trump-endorsed candidate Alan Wilson has defeated Trump-endorsed candidate Pamela Everett. Now, you may be wondering, why were there two Trump-endorsed candidates in that race? What is going on there? Well, Trump initially endorsed one candidate, Pamela Everett, but at the very last minute, when it of course became clear his candidate would lose, he decided to endorse the other candidate as well. And if that sounds completely stupid to you, well, that's because it is completely stupid. Now, after the race was called, Trump, without a hint of irony, of course, even posted this graphic you can see on your screen celebrating the victory with the words, "Alan Wilson wins," endorsed by President Trump, and quite a grimacy, frowny face there on Trump's face. The thing is about all of this is that Donald Trump is obsessed with the power of his endorsement and has therefore been trying to rewrite history anytime his endorsement doesn't prove to be all that powerful. This wasn't a one-off today. I mean, he did a version of this same thing in Iowa. When his preferred candidate for governor lost Iowa's Republican primary, Trump immediately declared that the whole thing was actually a big mix-up, saying, quote, "Had I been given the proper information, which I don't think I was, I probably would have endorsed the other person. The other person was much more Trump." Okay, then. Trump then did the same thing when his preferred candidate lost in the Republican primary for Georgia governor. He wrote to the winning candidate, "Congratulations to Rick Jackson, who very successfully campaigned on being Trump and won. He will be your next governor of Georgia. Can't wait." It's kind of the heads I win, tails you lose version of Republican primary endorsements. And the crazy part of it is Trump isn't exactly wrong, because none of the candidates who won without Trump's endorsements were running on an anti-Trump platform. They were all running on the same MAGA agenda. They praised Trump, they echoed his policies. One even explicitly compared himself to Trump in his TV ads. Those candidates will be unavoidably linked to him and his toxic agenda in November. And even as Trump's poll numbers sink and his disgraceful behavior becomes harder to ignore, the overwhelming majority of Republican primary candidates still bend the knee, at times in an incredibly cringy manner. I am looking at you, John Cornyn, I'm sorry. All to the same failing president. And you'll definitely hear analysis out there say that the same dynamics are playing out in both parties, that partisan primaries are dragging Republicans further to the MAGA right and Democrats further to the left, that it's all the same. It's all a part of the same exact trend. You will almost certainly hear some pundits say that after tonight's primaries in New York, either it's a sign Democrats should absolutely nominate a Democratic Socialist or else for president, or a sign that the Democratic Socialist wing of the party is on its way out, depending on the results. But either way, that's a pretty unsophisticated piece of analysis. Because the truth is the Democratic Party does not have the same problem the Republican Party has, where the only way to win is to be so uniformly the same. The only way to win is to pledge support to one dear leader, or one way of governing, or one policy agenda. And tonight's Democratic primary elections in New York are actually a perfect example of a party that is not beholden to one single ideology. Now, to be sure, there is a big fight brewing in some districts in New York City over which faction of the progressive left will represent America's largest city in Congress. In 2 New York City districts, New York Mayor Zohran Mamdani has backed primary challenges to incumbent members of Congress. That's interesting. Congressman Dan Goldman is facing a challenge from former New York City Comptroller Brad Lander, and Congressman Adriano Espaillat is facing a challenge from Democratic Socialist Daria-Liza Avila Chevalier. And in the open seat to replace retiring Congresswoman Nydia Velázquez, Democratic Socialist Claire Valdez has the backing of Mayor Mamdani as well, while Brooklyn Borough President Antonio Reynoso has the backing of more established New York Democrats. And that's interesting, those couple of races. All of these races are, of course, somewhat of a test for Mayor Mamdani and the rising Democratic Socialist movement in New York. And they're also a test for more establishment Democrats on whether they are in touch with what Democratic voters are looking for. And these particular races, and this is interesting too, have all centered on an issue where there has been some movement to the left within the Democratic Party writ large, ending military aid to Israel. But the thing is, not even all New York City primary battles are being waged along the same lines. So look at the race to replace retiring Congressman Jerry Nadler in a district which includes parts of the Upper East Side and then the Upper West Side. Now, most of the leading candidates in that race have declined to say whether or not they will vote against additional aid to Israel. Most of the leading candidates in that race are not the ones who've been on TV the most either. That's also interesting. And just north of the city, there's also a hotly contested primary to see who will take on Republican Congressman Mike Lawler. And that is a race where Democrats have a real chance of picking up a seat. Polling and fundraising suggests that the race is a contest between Army veteran Kate Conley and local legislator Beth Davidson. Well, there's another more progressive candidate who's trailing in recent polls. We'll see what happens tonight. Republicans have even launched their own attack ads to try and sink the more moderate candidate in that race, which isn't obviously something they would have to do if New York Democrats were already inclined to pick the most progressive candidate available to them, no matter what district it is. And it's not like this is some sleepy district, Mike Lawler's district. It's not like it's a district where Democratic voters are less active than in other places. I mean, we've watched Mike Lawler face chants of shame from angry organized constituents. Remember this? Who showed up to town halls in his district. It's only a district he won back in 2022. The point is, just because Democratic voters are motivated doesn't mean they are all being driven by the same ideology. The Democratic Party is a Big Ten party. It's a party committed to democracy and a diversity of viewpoints, a party that can elect very different leaders for very different constituencies. And the Republican Party is the party of one unpopular, toxic, lame duck, 80-year-old man. Let's get straight to MS Now's chief data reporter, Ali Velshi, who, of course, is standing by at the big board for us tonight. Ali, I know we're already seeing a lot of numbers out of New York, and I'm hearing we already have one to call. Tell us what's happening.
Dan Goldman is the first Democratic incumbent in the country to go down to defeat from an outside challenger. Brad Lander has been called as the candidate for New York District 10. Brad Lander, of course, these are all very, very Democratic districts, which means Brad Lander is most likely to become the next congressman. Now, I want to just go to the counties because New York 10 has got a part of southern Manhattan and part of Brooklyn. Take a look at the spread here with 36% of the vote in. Brad Lander's got 68.4 to 31% in Brooklyn. And if you go to southern Manhattan, very wealthy part of Manhattan, Brad Lander's leading there as well, 52% to 47%. So that race has been decided. We have called that. In the other two districts that are being contested with Zohran Mamdani's backing, in District 13, Adriana Espaillat has just taken the lead, but it's very, very close. It's a lead of 26 votes with 26% in. His challenger, Daria Eliza Avila Chevalier, is backed by Zohran Mamdani, but we are expecting this to be substantially closer, obviously, than New York 10 was. But this is their two incumbents are being challenged. In the third district, which is New York 7, there is no incumbent here. This is Nydia Velasquez's district. She's retired. We got two challengers here. Claire Valdez is endorsed by Zohran Mamdani and is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. Right now, with 30% of the vote in, she's got 52.2%. Antonio Reynoso, who you were talking about, has got 39.5% of the vote in. He's endorsed by the Workers' Party. So they're not that far off ideologically. This is a pretty liberal district, but we're going to watch that one very closely. In New York 12, you were just talking about this. Michael Lasher has taken the lead. You said the leading candidates here, the ones who are going to win, are not names most people have heard of. Michael Lasher performing very well on the Upper West Side. Alex Boris, also thought as being a major contender in this one, is polling very well on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Jack Kennedy Schlossberg has only got 11% of the vote in now, and 41% of the vote is already in total. George Conway, former Republican, Trump antagonist, coming in at 7.7% of the vote right now. This is thought of and is likely to be a contest between Lasher and Alex Boris. Again, in all of these Manhattan districts, they have one thing in common. Whoever wins this will probably be the next member of Congress from these districts come November. So we have one call already, and it is in New York 10. Brad Lander has won that race. Dan Goldman has gone down to defeat.
Ali Vilschi, thank you as always. We're going to be checking back in with you. Those are pretty. That was a pretty fast call, I think, from what we were expecting, and some numbers coming in. So we'll keep in very close touch with you about all of it. Now, I want to turn to two people who I am dying to talk to about the races in New York. They're people I ask questions about the races in New York all the time. Liz Smith is a veteran Democratic strategist who I should say is also an advisor to the Democratic group The Bench, which is supporting Kate Conley's campaign in New York's 17th Congressional District, along with Morris Katz, who served as a campaign strategist for Zohran Mamdani's mayoral campaign and is now advising multiple candidates on the ballot in New York tonight, including Assemblymember Michael Lasher, Brad Lander, and Assemblymember Claire Valdez. Okay. I don't know that we were even expecting to have numbers to really talk about quite yet, but we've seen some numbers. Obviously, we haven't seen them across the district, and they come in at different paces, as we know. But Liz, let me start with you. What are you watching for tonight, and any takeaways from what we've seen so far?
So a few things. There's a New York specific story. How long are Mayor Mamdani's coattails? You know, Morris is an advisor to the mayor, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that. Two, how much does institutional power still matter? You know, there are a bunch of candidates tonight, like Antonio Reynoso, like Adriana Espaillat, who had backing of labor, of the traditional institutions, Michael Lasher in New York 12, who you mentioned. And how much do those institutional powers still matter? And then third, you know, you talked a little bit about New York 17, the one swing district, the one race that will control, that will dictate the control of the House in November. And I'm looking to see what are swing Democrats looking for in their candidates, and you know, what does the path to a majority look like? Because that path to a majority will run through New York's 17th district.
No question about it. And Mike Lawler, he's not been there that long. I'm just going to remind people, he only won that seat a couple of years ago. Let me turn to you, Morris. I mean, some of these races you're involved in, some of them you're very closely engaged with. What's your takeaway from the numbers we know so far, and what are you watching for tonight?
I mean, I think a lot of people were posing a question about the results tonight in terms of what it meant about the mayor. And I think the fact that we have a call of unseating an incumbent congressman before we're even finished with the first segment says a lot about that. And I think it's that people are incredibly enthusiastic about the work the mayor's done as mayor and about his vision for a Democratic Party that fights for what it believes in, that has principles and convictions and an ambitious agenda to kind of meet the needs of working people. I think what Liz said is absolutely true, that they're seeing a real friction of kind of the status quo and the establishment and a new vision for a party. And so far from the results we're seeing coming in, people are really, really excited about a different vision for a party that is more populist, that is more bold, and that is going to not just take the fight to Donald Trump, but also have a vision for the Democratic Party that extends beyond him.
To the point on institutions you were making, I think some people have set this up as really a proxy fight between the mayor and Leader Jeffries. Do you think that is overcranked, Liz? What do you make of that setup?
I think it is a little overcranked. I really see it as the mayor flexing his political capital. Look, he had a stunning win in the Democratic primary for mayor. Full disclosure, I ranked him there and I voted for him proudly in the general election. And he's maintained his popularity, which is not an easy thing to do in New York City. And a really impressive thing about Mayor Mamdani is that he has defied all of the caricatures that people had of him and defied all expectations that people had that he would somehow be anti-police, let the city go to hell, and has shown that he is a really good manager and has shown an ability to work with Congressman Jeffries as well. Are they maybe on the opposite side of some races? Yes, but that happens in politics. And Jen, to the point you raised at the beginning of your show is this is the Democratic Party. We are not the Republican Party. This is not a party that is held captive by a cult of personality, that is loyal to only one person, like the Republican Party is to Donald Trump. And we should embrace the fact that we are a big tent party, that we can be a party of Zoran Mamdani, we can be a party of Hakeem Jeffries, maybe we're a party of Kate Conley in the Hudson Valley. And that is a party that can build a durable majority everywhere.
Let me ask you something, because there's no question, we don't know yet, Morris, but obviously the Brad Lander win is significant for Mayor Mamdani's endorsement. There are two other races everybody is certainly watching there. You obviously have been an advisor to him, but you've advised Democrats all across the country with a range of different views. I sort of tried to get a little bit ahead of this analysis I could see coming tomorrow, which is that what this means is that a Democratic socialist should be the presidential nominee because they can win across the country. What say you to that?
Well, I would look forward to seeing Liz work for them. But other than that, I think that what Liz said is exactly right. Is if we're going to win, and what makes our party unique compared to the other side is a big tent. And I think what we have right now, all too often, is a big tent that is emphasized on the wrong uniting factors. It's a big tent that is scared to challenge the status quo. It is a big tent that is scared to go after AIPAC or to go after corporate special interests or too hesitant to back working class candidates. What we can have is a big tent that meets the needs and reflects the districts that also opposes the status quo. And I think, whether that's Kate Conley in New York or candidates across the country, I was talking to someone the other day. I was saying, I believe we can have a tent that's big enough for Claire Valdez and for Sherrod Brown. And that's a party that brings a lot of people in, and that's really exciting. And I think in some ways what the mayor has embodied throughout his term here is he's both fighting for bold progressive solutions like universal childcare, but he's also paved over 100,000 potholes. And we can both believe in a government that is effective, a government that is efficient, a government that meets people where they are, and we can dream big. And I think there should be room in the party for all of it. And tonight looks like it's going to be a good step in that direction.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there sometimes is a perception that his election and his governing means it's burn everything down. And actually, that's not how he has governed entirely. He's certainly put a lot of change in place, gotten a lot of things done, but that's not been the motto. Liz, let me ask you about Israel, because there's no question that there has been movement on the left. We have seen that even in votes. An increasing number of Democrats voting against providing additional assistance to Israel in the aftermath of the war in Gaza. What do you think the takeaways from what we know now, or what could they be from tonight? What are you watching for in that regard?
I don't think it's even on the left. I think it's throughout the Democratic Party and really across the political spectrum. I think people saw the overreach of and the heavy-handed response from Benjamin Netanyahu after October 7th, and we're horrified by it. As much as Israel has been an ally in the past, there's no excusing, what he did after October 7th. And I've really rarely seen that sort of shift in perception of another country like we've seen with Israel. And I would just say it really isn't among just the left. And I think for any Democrats running this cycle, running in future cycles, the days of just being a reflexive cheerleader for Israel, regardless of who leads the country and what military campaigns they're waging, those days are gone. Those days are gone. And as long as Benjamin Netanyahu is in power, the Democratic Party's relationship with Israel is going to be very strained.
Even if there's somebody else in power and they continue the same policies, we will say, and that's very fair. It's not just one, it's the Democrats in general. Let me ask you, Morris. I mean, Liz mentioned, of course, that Mike Lawler's race. This is the race. I mean, these primaries are so interesting, lots to take from them. But that is the race that if Democrats are to win back the House, it's a very viable pickup. What does that race look like? What do you think it should look like in terms of how Democrats run against him? He's been trying to kind of say he's independent of Trump, but he welcomed Trump to the district. There's a lot of dynamics going on there, I should say.
I think you're seeing this across the country where, we've talked about Maine before. Similar to Susan Collins' playbook of it's a claim to independence that in no way is backed up by any fact. Mike Lawler is one of Donald Trump's biggest cheerleaders in Congress from a voting standpoint, and occasionally going on CNN and criticizing him in a cheap, fake way doesn't change that fact. And I think we need Democrats, and I think Kay Conley, if she's the nominee, will be someone who will be able to make this case, who can call out that fraudulence and who are not scared to, and who also can call out the corruption. And this is one of the that bothers me most about Mike Lawler, and there are many, is Mike Lawler is a career political operative. The idea that he's anything other than an embodiment of everything people hate about politics, the kind of sleazy creature of Albany, is a myth. And we need candidates who are able to kind of make that contrast clear and who can't be attacked in the same way. And so I think, Mike Lawler is going to lose because he can no longer hide in this political climate. And because I think the candidates we have to go up against him this year are really strong and going to make that case aggressively.
And can I
Liz,
just
get the last word? Go ahead, Liz. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, and that's a Morris really great point. And, Kate Conley might not be the type of candidate that you would necessarily work for, but she's not dissimilar in that she brings a completely different background to the table. There is nothing about her that screams politician. She's devoted her entire life to service. She's been in the military. She's one of the first women leaders of special operations, deployed 6 times, 3 Bronze Stars. And her first job in the military was as a military police officer. We know that tomorrow Mike Lawler is going to go out and try to say she's DSA, she is Zoran Mamdani in a costume or something like that. But it's going to be pretty hard to say that someone whose first job was as a military police officer is some sort of Brooklyn socialist. And her life is devoted to service. His is devoted to politics. And I think as Democrats, we all got to say, bring it on.
Liz Smith, Morris Katz. I will say you both have worked for all sorts of different candidates and continue to, and I think it's interesting to talk about what the qualities are that kind of make winning candidates. So thank you both for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you. We're just fighting for a tent big enough for me and Liz Smith.
There you go. I'll invite you to dinner, both of you, together. We can all hash it out. Okay, we're going to keep tracking. Fine. We're going to keep tracking these numbers out of New York all hour long. We're going to go back to Ali Velshi, and we're going to keep talking about the national implications for Democrats come November. Senator Raphael Warnock is standing by, and he joins me next. We have Senator Raphael Warnock sitting here. I cannot wait to talk to him, but we have a quick race call. So I'm going to go to Ali Velshi for more details on that.
Of the 3 districts in which Zoran Mamdani has supported a candidate, he is now up by 2. In District 7 in New York, Claire Valdez, the Mamdani-endorsed candidate, has been declared the winner there by the Associated Press. She will, again, by virtue of the fact that this is one of the most liberal districts in the entire country, likely be the next member of Congress from New York's 7th District. As we already told you, Brad Lander was declared the victor in New York 10, defeating an incumbent, Dan Goldman. Dan Goldman is the first incumbent, Democratic incumbent, who has lost his seat from an outside challenger. Two other incumbents had lost their seats in Texas, but both of them were either challenged by another incumbent or someone who had been redistricted in or somebody who was in Congress prior. We're still watching very closely District 13 in New York, 62% of the vote in. I just want to tell you something interesting here. This is northern Manhattan and the Bronx. The Bronx part of it is being won by Adriano Espaillat, the incumbent right now. He's got 60% to Daria Liza Avila Chevalier's 32%. But if you go into the northern Manhattan part of things, she's leading with 50% to 44.9%. Again, there's not enough here to declare who's going to be winning there. And in New York 12, Michael Lasher, this is 73% of the vote in, but it's pretty close. Michael Lasher has 39% to Alex Boris's 35%. It's going to be one of these two. Jack Schlossberg still hanging around under 11%, and George Conway has now moved into 5th place there. So it is going to be, as you characterized earlier, one of these two guys whose names are not nationally known. Jen?
Ali Velshi, we're going to keep checking in with you. There's another incumbent member of Congress. We'll all be watching closely there and see what happens.
Yes.
Thank you again. Well, we continue to pay attention to and cover another election night in America. I wanted to talk about something related but slightly different. I mean, do you remember how big of a scandal it was when Trump called Georgia's Secretary of State and told him to fine Trump 12,000 more votes after the 2020 election? A sitting president asking an official to help him cheat, to help him win an election he did not win. Now, that call was secret. It had to be leaked to the press. And now Trump is bragging about how he is pressuring officials to help him meddle in our elections. He's blurting stuff like this out at his rallies.
I called up the very powerful, very good U.S. attorney in California, and I said, do me a favor. Take a look. They're trying to steal that election, too.
Do me a favor. Do me a favor. That's a kind of alarming thing coming out of his mouth. Now, we don't know for certain, but we assume that the U.S. attorney in California Trump wanted a favor from was this guy, Bill Estehle, who, after Trump started baselessly alleging California's primary elections were rigged, announced multiple election fraud investigations in California, despite no evidence of any fraud. And it's very clear that Trump is trying to breathe new life into the big lie. It's clear that he is trying to use his power as president to spread misinformation and fear and suppress votes. But it's also clear that people are not going to sit around and take it. They are fighting back all across the country. Yesterday, a new analysis from the Washington Post found that despite or maybe even because of Trump, Democratic turnout is up across the country, even in Republican districts. For months now, the Trump administration has been trying to purge voter rolls across the country by using an error-prone database to check voter citizenship, purging perfectly legal voters in the process, even though voter fraud by non-citizens is exceedingly rare, to put it mildly. Yesterday, a federal judge blocked the Trump administration from continuing the practice, which the judge said threatened the sacred right to vote. But the fight is far from over. And on another election night across the country, that fight is very important to pay attention to. Joining me now is Raphael Warnock, senator for the great state of Georgia and author of the new book, The Crooked Places Made Straight, I have right here. It's a little shorter from your other book, but it's still excellent and easy read for anyone.
Great.
Let me start by asking you, one of the points you make in this book, or that I took away from this book, is that we have to look to history and realize a lot of things have happened in history that we've made it through, but also be clear-eyed about kind of what is ahead too, and that's a point you've made in the past. Last week, Republicans in Georgia decided to reject Governor Brian Kemp's call to redraw states' congressional maps, which would diminish, of course, the power of black voters. There was some reporting that suggested they held back because of concern it would generate greater voter turnout in favor of Jon Ossoff and in favor of the governor's candidate. Do you think that's why?
Oh, that's clearly what happened.
Yeah.
They didn't all of a sudden, receive a divine revelation. I can tell you that. They
bet not.
They didn't wake up and say, well, we're going to do the right thing. No, the people of Georgia stood up. And as a voice for Georgia, I thought it was important for me to stand there with them. And so I actually left D.C. in the middle of the week because I thought it was important to stand up in this moment where a sitting president of the United States is, and the Supreme Court has encouraged the governor and others to diminish the power of ordinary citizens. Mm-hmm. And I was inspired by the ways in which ordinary people were standing up and saying, no, we're not going to let this happen. This is Georgia, after all. This is the home state of Martin Luther King Jr. and John Lewis, who was a member of my church, and Andrew Young. We know who we are. And I tell you, before I got back to Washington, the news had come down that they were not going to do this after all. They were right to be worried that this was going to be a massive voter turnout in response to this. I've got news for them. Georgia voters are still going to turn out in massive numbers because of what they're not doing. The Trump administration isn't doing a thing to help with these rising costs. The Georgia legislature met for months while they were in session. They did nothing for these rising utility costs that Georgians are being saddled with, the crisis in housing and affordability. They came back into session to prevent Georgians from holding them accountable. It backfired last week, and it's going to backfire come November.
One of the points, and I've talked to Senator Ossoff about this as well as Keisha Lance Bottoms, just that they're going to come back, I assume, the Republican legislature next year and try to do this.
They tabled the issue. I expect them to raise it again, for
and
sure.
we should be pretty clear-eyed about that,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Of the stakes here, essentially, in these elections. Let me ask you about another point of pushback that you were also involved in, because last week we also saw the federal government abandon its plans to turn a warehouse in Social Circle, Georgia, into a 10,000-bed ICE detention center. Why do you think the Trump administration did that, and what do you think the lessons are from that?
I can tell you that Social Circle, Georgia, is a town of 5,000 people. It's a red district. Trump has a lot of votes in Social Circle, Georgia. I've got a few. But I promised the people of Georgia that I would stand with them, even as I fought for them, I would walk with them. And it was important for me to show up for the people of Social Circle, Georgia. They were going to build a 10,000-bed detention center across the street from an elementary school. I went and I saw it with my own eyes. This 10,000-bed detention center would have tripled the size of the town. It would have been overwhelming to their water infrastructure, their water treatment facility. They didn't have the wherewithal to sustain this. The mayor learned about it by reading about it in the Washington Post. And so I and others continue to raise the issue. And the word that we have right now is that they are not going to open this warehouse of a detention center, which, by the way, they spent $128 million for, twice the market rate. The people of Social Circle, Georgia, whatever they voted for, they didn't vote for this. And they made that very clear. I think the lesson is when we shine a bright light, light is a disinfectant. And when we elevate the issue, and when the people raise their voices, it makes a difference. It made a difference in Minnesota. No one is, not enough people are saying it. The people of Minnesota made a change there. They made a difference. The ICE left because of the ways in which folks were standing up, ordinary neighbors standing up for each other. People of Social Circle, Georgia pushed back. And when we push back, we're seeing results. And so in this moment, the answer to this assault on democracy is more democracy. The people raising their voices, using all of the instruments of protest that make a democracy healthy. And this is how we win.
Ask you about another piece we've talked about before, which is faith. And this is something that's also interwoven throughout your book. Of course it is. And of course your own history. And you've talked about how it's driven you in terms of how you think about issues from a moral perspective and also how you govern. When you hear people, I know you had some comments on Speaker Mike Johnson and you've met with him. When you hear people like J.D. Vance, whose book came out the same day as yours, I believe, talking about his faith and using it as justification for supporting the policies he supports, what goes through your mind?
I don't know what Bible he's reading. And I think, what we've seen time and time again is that there are those who are people of faith. Christians have often been on the wrong side of history. They've been on the wrong side of the issue. There were many Christians who supported slavery. There were Christians who were silent during Hitler's Third Reich, who stated what I'm hearing from a lot of my Republican friends when I remind them that there's some 2,000 verses in the Bible that talk about how you treat the poor. The book says that the one who crushes the poor insults his maker. What Mike Johnson and others have said to me is that this is about personal behavior. No, I think that's a misreading of the scripture. And that kind of way of constraining faith so that it's only in the realm of the individualistic and privatistic, that's how you get a Führer in Germany, and the church going right along with it. That's how you get a Christian slaveocracy. This is a moral moment in America, and we need people of faith and people who claim no faith tradition at all, but are people of moral courage to stand up for the best and the highest in our ideals. That's why I wrote this book, The Crooked Places Made Straight. We're the ones to bend that arc that bends towards justice.
Senator Raphael Warnock, always a pleasure talking to you. I always learn so much. Very thoughtful. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so very much.
Okay, we got to sneak in a quick break, but the numbers are really starting to come in right now out of those fascinating primaries in New York. We've already made some calls, but some races are still very tight. Ali Velshi is going to tell us where things stand when we come back. The numbers are still coming in from primaries in New York and elsewhere. So let's bring back MS Now senior data reporter Ali Velshi, who is still at the big board with his best.
Yeah, lots happening here. I want to bring you up to speed on a few of the districts you've been following. New York District 12, which is sort of in the middle of Manhattan, all the way from the west to the east side. 83% of the vote in, and we do not have a call here yet. Michael Lasher is in the lead, has been in the lead since polls closed. But Alex Boris is tightening his race a little bit. Only 4 points separating them right now. Jack Schlossberg in fourth place, and George Conway in sixth place right there. Let's go up to New York 13, which is where Daria Liza Avila Chevalier is challenging Adriano Espaillat, who is the incumbent. 79% of the vote is in here. Again, we do not have a call, but Daria Liza Avila Chevalier's lead is growing by a little bit as day of vote comes in. There's some sense that the day of voters, the advance vote was a little slow here amongst her supporters. It seems to have strengthened, so we're watching that very closely. And I want to go outside of New York to the Hudson Valley, District 17. This is Republican incumbent Mike Lawler's district. He's thought of as a moderate Republican. This is 35% of the vote in. This is kind of where we thought it would be. Kate Conley is the strongest performer right now. It's got a lead of about 3,000 votes. She's got 52% to Beth Davidson's 28%. There are a number of candidates in here, but we definitely thought that Conley and Davidson would be in the lead right now. Kate Conley's got that. That's another one that we're going to be watching very closely this evening, Jen.
Ali Velshi, they're coming in fast and furious.
Yeah.
Thank you for being there and paying attention. Keep us updated. We'll stay in very close touch over the next 15 minutes, of course.
My pleasure.
Okay, my next guest was fired by Trump's Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, last year. So she decided to become a candidate for Congress. We'll talk to her when we come back. We have yet another call to make out of New York. Democrat Kate Conley has won the Democratic nomination in New York's 17th district and will face Republican Mike Lawler in November. She's a combat veteran who served in both Iraq and Afghanistan, which is kind of a nice segue into my next guest, because right now Nancy LaCour is leading in the runoff to become the Democratic candidate in South Carolina's 1st district. Nancy LaCour is a 3-star admiral and the former chief of the Navy Reserve who was unceremoniously forced out under Trump's former cable news host turned defense secretary, Pete Hegseth, and a pattern we have seen over this Trump administration over and over again. Now, what we've also seen is that accomplished longtime officials being removed from their posts and then doing something about it, like running for political office. Nancy LaCour is one of those officials, and she joins me now. It's great to see you. So I just mentioned the race hasn't been called yet, but you're ahead. How are you feeling about it?
We feel really good. I think we'll get it called here shortly. I've got, all my supporters here. They're waiting for me after I'm done with this. Hopefully we'll be able to actually address the crowd here.
Exciting. So I want to ask you, as a veteran and a longtime military official, what is your response to Pete Hegseth requesting from Congress near roughly $80 billion to cover the cost of Trump's deeply unpopular war with Iran? What do you make of that?
It's unacceptable, and it's also predictable. I think that's just the way this whole administration has been running. They think there's just an open checkbook and they can keep doing what they feel like, and they're just going to get it all covered. And it's just more of the same from this administration.
You're part of a group of senior military officials, and I just went through your incredible resume, which I'm sure the people in your district recognize as well, who were dismissed by Defense Secretary Hegseth as part of this massive purge of very qualified people. What has been your response to that kind of purge happening at the same time as a major conflict? What should people understand about the impact of that?
It's significant impact. I mean, from the moment it started, it's just sending a very clear message to current service members and future service members, that you're not wanted here. We don't need you in our armed forces. And it's even more, damaging, when you do it in the middle of a conflict, right? And that's not just damaging to the force, but risky for our whole country. And as you can see, it hasn't gone so well.
For people watching who are just getting to know a little bit about you and learning about your background, can you share a little bit about how your longtime military career brought you, and your end by Hegseth, I should say, your firing by Hegseth, brought you to make the decision to run for Congress?
Yeah, absolutely. It was an abrupt end. I was 1 year into what is normally a 4-year job. Was notified that I was being relieved effective immediately. I walked out of the Pentagon an hour later. And I struggled to figure out what was next for me. But the one thing I couldn't shake was this feeling that I wasn't done serving. I thought I was going to be in uniform serving for 3 more years and decided there's too much at risk. I can't sit on the sidelines. I can serve differently. And then I launched this campaign for Congress in January.
You're running to represent the district currently held by Republican Nancy Mace. She's run afoul of Trump in recent months. That certainly impacted her own primary race to try to win the governor's seat. But she won that seat while being a very vocal supporter of Trump and the MAGA movement, the one you're running to represent. Why do you believe you can flip this district as a Democrat?
Well, I think the fact that every day we turn the TV on and this administration is doing something that harms Americans helps. Right? People are fed up with this administration. And if I focus on what matters to everybody in this district, which is what I've been campaigning on, the cost of living, affordability, whatever you want to call it, impacts everybody. That's not just Democrats. It's Democrats, Republicans, and independents. And if we focus on those things that are impacting everybody in this district, people who are fed up with Nancy Mace as well. She has been a show horse, and I think this district is ready for a workhorse.
I've asked other candidates who are running in districts that have been more traditionally red or more traditionally Republican this question, especially people with a background like yours. How has the war in Iran been playing? How have people been digesting it? What have those conversations been like as you've been campaigning in the district?
Yeah, people come to me in tears, literally. I walk into events and people come up to me in tears and they're like, you understand this. You need to help us. We want somebody who will push back against this administration. And it is very real for this district. We have a very, very heavy military footprint, a huge veteran population here, and people are just fed up.
I have some news for you that I think you're going to really like while we've been sitting here, because the Associated Press, which is what we go with too, just called the race for you to be the Democratic nominee. So congratulations to you. I know you want to go talk to your supporters, but I'm delighted to deliver that news to you as well. Thank you so much for taking the time, being with us.
All right, Jen. Thanks to you. Thank you. Take care.
Okay, we've got to take a quick break, but Lawrence has Senator Jon Ossoff standing by, and we'll be right back. That does it for me tonight on a big election night. One we'll probably still talking about a bit tomorrow, I bet. The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen. We have the Georgia Senate delegation tonight. You had Senator Raphael Warnock. Senator Jon Ossoff is going to join me during this hour. Obviously, he's running for re-election, and in a tough one, as Georgia always is. So we'll be hearing from him about that. We'll also get the latest numbers from Ali Velshi later in the hour about what's happening on election night.
So interesting. I mean, I just spoke with Senator Warnock about the fact that Republicans didn't move forward with redistricting, but they could next year. Elections have consequences, so important for people to remember. But I'll be looking forward to watching your convo with his colleague from Georgia, shall we say.
Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Well, Donald Trump has scored his lowest job approval rating yet in a Reuters poll at 34%. And we have what could be another measure of Donald Trump's unpopularity and disapproval. Baby names. Donald is the new Adolf. The baby name Donald has hit its lowest point in popularity in American history, according to Social Security Administration data reviewed by the website Notice. news of the United States. The federal agency received fewer than 400 Social Security card applications for baby Donalds last year, making Donald the nation's 690th most popular baby name amid Trump's return to the White House for a second term. Less than 400 babies out of 3.6 million babies born last year will have to live with the name Donald, which they might want to change after taking elementary school history classes. More people named their babies Lawrence, a name I would not wish on anyone, than Donald. More babies were actually named Princeton last year than Donald. Princeton, a name I've never heard for anything other than a town in New Jersey. And, oh yeah, a university. Adolf dropped rather dramatically in popularity after Adolf Hitler executed 6 million Jewish people in death camps while he was losing World War II before he took his own life. And we learned last night from the reporting of Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan in their new book, Regime Change, Inside the Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump, that Donald Trump happily compares himself to Adolf Hitler because a caddy for a retired professional golfer wrote an assessment of the most powerful people in history in which the caddy concluded that Donald Trump is more powerful than Adolf Hitler was, or Joseph Stalin, or any of the other mass-murdering, hateful, sociopathic dictators in history. And Donald Trump is proud of that. Donald Trump is so proud to be compared to Adolf Hitler that he actually gave that document written by the caddy to Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan. From page 412 of their book, the evident pleasure Trump took in the company of Mao, Hitler, and Stalin. He drew no distinction between those who built and those who destroyed, between those who liberated and those who enslaved. What mattered was that they had had huge power and that he had more. It is all in their remarkable book, which serves as documented confirmation for what many of you have assumed is happening in the Trump White House. Stupidity, impulsivity, no homework, and no one able to stand in the way to save the world from Donald Trump. With a new poll showing only 24% think Donald Trump's war with Iran was worth the costs, and just 23% think the United States is now in a stronger position with Iran compared to its position before the war. But even those people are not naming their babies Donald. At 7:20 a.m. today, Donald Trump, who has lied about his war in Iran every day of that war, posted something on social media that, just based on Donald Trump's past record alone, is probably not entirely true. And so we will approach this with the standard that Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan of the New York Times told Jon Stewart they use for statements from the Trump White House. And so, on the assumption that this is false until proven otherwise, this is what Donald Trump posted at 7:20 a.m. today. Iran has fully and completely agreed to highest level nuclear inspections long into the future. Infinity, 3 exclamation points. This will ensure nuclear honesty. If they did not agree to this, there would be no further negotiations. Based on this and other major concessions being made by Iran, I have agreed to allow the Hormuz Strait to remain open with no further naval blockade. However, all ships are remaining in place should it be necessary to reinstitute the blockade, which seems at this point highly unlikely. Secretary of State John Kerry, in the most important diplomatic achievement of the 21st century, obtained an agreement with Iran on behalf of President Obama to allow what Donald Trump would clumsily call the highest level of nuclear inspections in Iran. And when Donald Trump came into office for the first time, he said that that wasn't good enough. Inspections anywhere in Iran at any time just were not good enough. And so Donald Trump voided that agreement with Iran, policed by the United States and 5 other countries and the International Atomic Energy Agency. It wasn't good enough when John Kerry and President Obama obtained that agreement. But now Donald Trump says it's good enough. Any kind of inspections are good enough. Any promise of inspections. The trouble is, Iran says they've promised nothing. They've agreed to nothing about inspections. Iran says what Donald Trump is saying is not true. The New York Times reports Iranian officials said on Tuesday that their country did not make any such commitment. In fact, they said the matter was barely discussed. Esmail Baghi, spokesman for Iran's foreign ministry, said there was no plan to invite inspectors to nuclear sites that were hit by U.S. and Israeli airstrikes. So, not only does the Trump team not have any way of finding out where Iran's nuclear material might be, they don't even know where the nuclear inspectors are.
That will happen at the minimum this week, but we think even some of those conversations with the inspectors and with the IAEA could happen as soon as today. But I haven't checked in with our team since we made that 2 a.m. phone call to some of those inspectors.
Donald Trump is scheduled to go to the Republican senators' weekly working lunch tomorrow in a private room just off the Senate floor, where reporters are never invited in. And so we won't know for sure if Donald Trump runs into the kind of resistance tomorrow that some Republican senators are promising.
I need to know why we've actually even relieved Iran of sanctions that date back to pre-JCPOA. I need to understand how this escrow account works. It's going to have roughly $10 billion coming in, where literally a U.S. refiner can legally now purchase Iranian oil, I guess if it's a lower price than some other jurisdiction. I need to understand why that's a wise strategy before the Iranians have actually signed up to some fairly stringent requirements. I think they're probably going to get $40–50 billion in revenue, and this is not likely to end the way the president wants it to. So giving them a lot before they actually demonstrate they're negotiating in good faith is concerning to me.
Concerned about the oil sanctions being eased right now?
Yeah, I mean, my gosh, we're back to pre-JCPOA relief on oil sanctions. And so I'm just saying, maybe the president's just got more of a trusting vibe with these folks. I think they're stringing them along.
Yesterday, Republican Senator Tim Sheehy put it another way. He said that he thinks Iran has now made Donald Trump the victim of Iran's rope-a-dope strategy.
What we're seeing now is what the rope-a-dope they usually perform, which is buy time, try to lead us along till hopefully President Trump and this team's out of office and they can re-up their campaign.
Someone on the senator's staff should remind Senator Sheehy that the World Heavyweight Championship boxer Muhammad Ali coined the phrase rope-a-dope to describe what he was doing to his opponent in the boxing ring. Muhammad Ali's opponent was the dope in the rope-a-dope. And so Republican Senator Sheehy just made Donald Trump Iran's dope. Leading off our discussion tonight is retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral and former White House National Security Communications Advisor John Kirby. He is now the director of the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics and an MS now national security analyst. Admiral Kirby, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's always so important to be able to hear your perspective on this. What do you make of where things appear to stand tonight?
Very unclear. As you can tell from your opening and from the comments that have been made both by Iranian officials and by American officials, it seems like both sides are still pretty far apart. Now, look, I mean, to be fair, we've been through this before. I saw it happen when I was with Secretary Kerry in the JCPOA negotiations, the Iranians will say things publicly and yet privately at the table be singing a different tune. And so we have to allow for the fact that that could be happening right now. But the maximalist positions that both have been taking consistently indicate to me that there's still a long way to go to get to any tangible outcomes here in terms of commitments and concessions by the Iranians that will actually meet our national security interests. In the meantime, I'm concerned, as so many senators are, that we are making concessions tangibly, effectively, and publicly to Iran in terms of sanctions relief right now, that it will be hard to rein back in should the Iranians not meet their commitments.
Yeah, the point that Senator Tillis is making seems to be so important at this stage. Iran has, at this stage, actually done nothing. But they've already received a great deal in terms of concessions from Donald Trump.
The only thing I could say that they've done, and we have to put a caveat on this too, is the Strait of Hormuz is technically open. They are not firing drones or missiles at ships as we speak. That said, the traffic going through the strait is still just a trickle compared to it once was. But again, we don't think, and they should never have any control over traffic in the Strait of Hormuz. That's an international waterway. Freedom of the seas can't just be for whales and icebergs. It has to be for everybody. So the one concession we've gotten is that the strait's open for traffic, but even then, it's very measured, and Iran still has a trigger, an ability to limit that flow should they want. So you're right. There's not been a lot conceded by Iran so far. I do think it's important to remember we're early in this process. We'll see where it goes. But right now, it appears as the United States is doing more conceding than Iran is doing.
Certainly in the Obama administration, any kind of relief of any aspect of sanctions or anything else was conditioned upon Iran actually formally agreeing to something or actually doing something. This seems to be a concede first, figure it out later approach.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that, Lawrence. What I suspect the American side will tell you is, well, they've opened up the strait. They're not harassing traffic, so we're offering some sanctions relief. But again, we have to keep the open of the Strait of Hormuz in some context here. The other thing that's interesting is the sanctions relief they're offering, the unfreezing of assets. They are using the same arguments that President Obama used and President Biden used when we likewise unfroze some assets. And we're talking about how they were going to be monitored, how they were going to be delivered. But when it was done by Democratic administrations, and I was there for both times, the Republican side was howling quite a bit about the fungibility of funds and assets, and how even if you can control those assets and where they go into Iran, Iran will then be freed up to spend other money on supporting terror. And we're not hearing that same hue and cry from the Republican side of the aisle, which I find rather ironic.
Admiral John Kirby, thank you very much for starting off our coverage tonight.
Good to be with you, Lawrence.
Thank you. And we have some breaking news in the big board with Ali Velshi. Ali, what do we have?
We've got New York 12, District 12, which is the middle of Manhattan. 85% of the vote is in. The Associated Press is projecting that Micah Lasher will be the Democratic candidate. And of course, Lawrence, as you know, in these very liberal districts, the Democratic candidate will likely be the next member of Congress from the 12th district. This is a tight race between Alex Boris and Micah Lasher. Most people don't know these names, but Jack Kennedy Schlossberg was the candidate that some people thought might have an edge here. He's only got 11% of the vote. George Conway, former Republican turned Trump antagonist, has 6% of the vote. So that is decided. Several other districts in New York have been decided. As you saw, Dan Goldman defeated by Brad Lander in New York 10. Claire Valdez defeating Antonio Reynoso. This was a vacant district, so there was not an incumbent. This was Nydia Velázquez's district. And this one we have not called yet. This is District 13. This is Daria Liza Avila Chevalier, also backed by Zoran Mamdani, challenging Adriano Espaillat, long-term incumbent dean of sort of Latino politics, head of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, 86% of the vote in right now. She's taking a lead. She's got a lead of 2,000 votes. That's because most of the vote coming in now is day of vote. Espaillat was leading in the vote that had already been cast. In the day of vote, she seems to be ahead. But again, we are not able to project this yet. So of the three Mamdani-backed candidates in New York, two have won so far, and the first incumbent has gone down to an outside challenger in the Democratic Party.
Ali, thank you. We'll be watching more as the evening goes on. And coming up, we have more breaking news. Another Trump loss in federal court tonight. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse will join us next. With breaking news tonight, a federal judge in California has issued an order blocking Donald Trump's immigration officers from making arrests inside immigration courts anywhere in the country. In U.S. District Judge Casey Pitt's 71-page ruling, the judge writes, quote, "For 80 years, Congress has commanded federal agencies to think before they act. That instruction, codified in the Administrative Procedures Act, does not require an agency to make the choice that a reviewing court might deem preferable, but it demands that an agency at least provide sound reasons for following its chosen course. It is now clear that the lack of a connection between ICE's stated rationales for the 2025 courthouse arrest policies and the expansion of arrests at immigration courthouses results not from merely unreasoned decision-making, but a complete lack of decision-making." And the New York Times reports, quote, "The ruling came in a class action lawsuit challenging the Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency and the Executive Office for Immigration Review, which is part of the Justice Department, over a surge in immigration-related arrests at courthouses and increasingly long detention of immigrants in ICE facilities intended for brief periods." And joining our coverage now is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, the top Democrat on the Environment and Public Works Committee. He also serves on the Senate Finance Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator, what is your reaction to this breaking news about the arrests that were happening in these courthouses?
You know, courthouses are supposed to be sort of protected places. But this has been going on for a while with ICE and CBP. We had an incident in Rhode Island where they had agreed not to operate in the courthouse. And there was a court rule that you can't take photographs in the courthouse, a rule for everyone. And despite the agreement, agents came in to operate in the courthouse. Despite the rule, they started taking pictures. They were such bozos that they were surveilling a high school intern while thinking they were looking for some like 30-year-old guy. And then the kid was nervous and went to the judge he was interning for, and the judge walked him out to his car to drive him back to high school, at which point the agents went at the judge by way of like genius clue behavior. He was parked in a judge's only parking spot, and they didn't seem to figure out that he was a judge, so they threatened to smash his windows and drag the kid out of the car, a judge, if he didn't turn over this high schooler. Eventually, they knew that they were wrong. They detained the kid for an hour. But like this kind of behavior is what leads judges to get completely fed up with this misbehavior smack bang in their courthouses. So it really comes as no surprise when you look at their track record of violating an agreement, breaking the rules of the court, being idiotic about not telling a 19-year-old from a 30-year-old, not figuring out that a judge is a judge parked in a judge's only spot, and then F-bombing and threatening to smash the judge's car windows. Like, who does that? So I'm not surprised.
So the Senate voted again to limit Donald Trump's ability to wage war in Iran. This time 50 senators were enough to get it. 4 Republicans who've joined the Democrats before on this. A couple of senators were absent.
And Senator McConnell was missing.
Yeah, and Donald Trump's coming to the Senate tomorrow, at least he's scheduled to meet with Republican senators in their Wednesday lunch, where when you listen to Senator Tillis and some others, he could be running into some real resistance about where he is in his public negotiating with Iran, where Iran already seems to be allowed all of the revenues from oil production and oil flows, taking the sanctions off their oil, everything, before Iran's actually done anything.
Yeah, I think he's going to run into a lot more skepticism and irritation than he has before. You've got the Iran deal, which the more you look at it, the worse it looks. It looks like it's significantly worse than the JCPOA already, and allows tens of billions, maybe even hundreds of billions of dollars to the Iranians. At the same time, he's stuffed this incompetent operative, his stooge, Pulte, in as the director of national intelligence, which is ordinarily considered a serious grown-up position, who's already firing people and has a history of rooting through private records for partisan political purposes. Then you've got Blanche coming over that they're all going to have to vote on for Attorney General. He's no picnic. And in the meantime, just to put the cherry on top, you've got this complete fiasco with the reflecting pool, which doesn't matter really, except as an emblem of the incompetence and self-dealing in the Trump administration. So the whole thing just is, you know, it stinks. It's rotten. And I think Republican senators, as they close in on November and look at losing their majority, they're getting all fed up with this kind of irresponsible behavior.
And senators like John Cornyn, who've already been knocked out in their Republican primary by Donald Trump, are going to be in that room tomorrow. Senator Cornyn has said he intends to ask some tough questions. It's one of those rooms we can never get a camera into, so we'll never know.
Wouldn't it be nice, though?
Yeah, it would be. Tomorrow would be the day.
Right, Lawrence?
Yeah,
to be a fly
tomorrow
on that
would
wall.
be the day. That's right. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, it is primary night in multiple states, as we've already seen tonight. We're going to have Senator Jon Ossoff join us, running for re-election in Georgia. That's next. With Donald Trump scoring his lowest job approval ratings in multiple polls, 2 days ago, on Sunday morning, Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff, who is running for re-election, spoke at the Beulah Missionary Baptist Church in Decatur, Georgia, about Donald Trump and his endorsed Georgia Republican Senate candidate, Mike Collins.
We see a faithless president.
Amen.
Self-dealing while he depicts himself as Christ. While he depicts the Obamas as apes. Did you see that? While he plunges the nation recklessly into war, plunders our health care, and sends prices soaring. So here we are in Georgia, where the president sent spies and agents to seize your ballots. Did you all see that, Beulah? Yeah. And why did they go to Fulton County? Why Fulton County? I submit to you it's because the fact that black voters and black political power were instrumental to his defeat is even more offensive to this lifelong racist than the defeat itself. The election deniers, they tell a lie so absurd and therefore so debasing to tell that the act of telling it proves the teller's total and humiliating submission.
Right, right.
And you may have seen that one of those election deniers now asks to represent Georgia in the Senate. The congressman's son. who supports war and cutting your health care and openly associates himself with bigotry and anti-Semitism. Because the hatred that Mike Collins promotes is a relic of the bad old days.
Right.
Georgia's spirit of tolerance will overwhelm and defeat bigotry.
Amen.
And our defense of voting rights will be so fierce that no plot against the franchise will foil the will of the people.
Joining us now is Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff of Georgia. He is running for re-election this year. Senator, when you're out there, obviously Georgia is filled with Republican voters, filled with Donald Trump voters. Are you, in encountering those voters, are you experiencing any of their alienation from Donald Trump? Because they are the ones who are delivering this very low job approval rating for Donald Trump in these polls.
Lawrence, thank you for having me. And look, Georgia is full of good, decent people. And people need to understand that my opponent, Mike Collins, is someone well known for his poor character and his low integrity. There's a reason that a number of prominent conservatives in Georgia are either backing me or saying they just can't bring themselves to vote for Mike Collins. It's because he is a bigot and an anti-Semite. He's engaged in the vicious anti-Semitic harassment of a Jewish reporter and still refuses to apologize for it. He praised young men who were taunting a black woman on a college campus with monkey noises. His chief of staff was recently revealed to have been working with a white nationalist to try to get a Holocaust denier freed from prison. Mike Collins is currently under federal investigation for the illegal misuse of tax dollars. And all the while, he has been pro-war, pro-tariff, pro-cutting your health care, and voted to double health insurance premiums for more than 1 million Georgians. He will be Trump's puppet if he is elected. And I need folks across the country to understand that he could win this race. Georgia is the most competitive battleground state in the country, and the president's going to spend vast sums of money and his allies vast sums of money to try to get Mike Collins into the Senate for 6 full years. I need folks to go to electjon.com and help me defeat this man who is unfit for office.
The one thing we know and we've seen about Georgia Senate races is that they are very, very close. And when you and when Senator Warnock have won, they have been very, very close. I want to listen to a Republican voter, a lifetime Republican, and I'm wondering if you're running into any of these kinds of Republicans out there in Georgia. Let's listen to Tucker Carlson.
I would not support the Republican Party. There's no chance I would support the Republican Party. How could I or any American voter support a political party that's not loyal to the United States, that puts the interests of a foreign country above those of its own citizens? That's it's not possible to vote for people like that, and I'm not going to. There's no defending this because it's immoral, and it's exactly the opposite of what a political party in a democracy is charged with doing, which is representing its own voters, its own citizens, its own nation, and they're not doing that. So no, I'm out. And if I'm out, then I think a lot of other people are out.
Is that your experience, Senator? Are a lot of other people, a lot of other Republicans out, as Tucker Carlson puts it?
I'm hearing it more and more. And I think, the president's betrayal of his promises, of his movement, and of the nation is so undeniable. The president who promised to lower prices on day one, and right now, Americans are paying all-time record high prices for groceries and health care and housing. The president who promised to keep us out of foreign wars, who has now been globally humiliated by his failure in Iran. The president who promised to drain the swamp, whose family is raking in billions of dollars from foreign princes and oligarchs while he sits in the Oval Office. This president is disgraced. He is a failed lame duck president And I think we see the country turning against him in a powerful way. But he's a failed lame duck president sitting on $350 million of political cash that he's going to spend in this Georgia Senate race and in races across the country. We can take nothing for granted. And I don't want folks to feel complacent or overconfident because the president's so deeply unpopular. And again, I need folks to visit electjohn.com and make sure I've got the resources to win.
So Donald Trump has a 22% approval on the cost of living issue that you've been campaigning on. And while he faces that kind of number in the United States, he is now expressing concerns about how hard life is in Iran. And he wants to make sure that the people of Iran get help from the United States. He wants to make sure that the people of Iran get food from the United States and all sorts of other supplies from the United States. That's a concern I have not heard him recently express for the people of the United States.
Well, it's certainly not very America first. And remember, it was just a few months ago that he was demanding and promising Iran's unconditional surrender. But the other thing that is really bothering people is that while Americans are paying record high prices for just about everything, the first families becoming billions of dollars wealthier, sweetheart deals all over the world, the president is literally building a monument to himself. You know, as a cancer patient reckons with the possibility of losing health coverage because he attacked the Affordable Care Act, he is adorning the Oval Office in gold trim. You know, I've been saying this for months on the campaign trail in Georgia. I think this is what is really animating so much of the discontent. The Trump family, the Trump administration, they are the elites that they've pretended to hate. They are the spitting image, the living symbols of corruption and oligarchy in the United States, and I think that they're going to face a massive wave of backlash and a rebuke this fall.
Georgia Senator Jon Ossoff, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, White House reporters got an important lesson last night, a lesson I've been hoping they would get and desperately hoping they would learn, a lesson about how to interview Donald Trump and how useless it is for them to have the cell phone number of this president of the United States. That lesson is next. The authors of the new best-selling book, Regime Change: Inside the Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump, New York Times reporters Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan taught White House reporters a lesson last night in how you do it. It is such an important lesson that it bears repeating tonight, and I'm sure it will need to be repeated again and again. It was not something that they said in their first television appearance, which was on this program last night. It came in a discussion with Jon Stewart on The Daily Show, which was taped earlier and broadcast immediately after this program last night. Last night, we showed you a clip of Jonathan Swan's 2020 interview, unforgettable interview of Donald Trump as part of his introduction on this program, and to remind you that he conducted the single best television interview of Donald Trump ever conducted by anyone, anywhere. Jon Stewart remembers that interview as enthusiastically as I do, and he brought it up last night, opening the door for Jonathan Swan. Don't move on. Stay. Stay. That was just my favorite thing in that great interview last night, which is available online. You should watch it. Okay. Now that we've all heard Jonathan Swan describe so vividly there just how he did it, let's all go back in time once again and watch in awe as he does it.
The point is, because we are so much better at testing than any other country in the world, we show more cases.
The figure I look at is death. And death is going up now.
Okay,
and it's 1,000 a day.
If you look at death...
Yeah, it's going up again.
Let's look.
Daily death.
Take a look at some of these charts.
I'd love to.
We're going to look.
Let's look.
And if you look at death...
Yeah, it's started to go up again.
One. Well, right here, the United States is lowest in numerous categories, we're lower than the world.
Lower than
we're
the
lower
world?
than
What is that?
Europe.
In what?
Look,
In what?
take a look. Right here. Here's case death.
Oh, you're doing death as a proportion of cases. I'm talking about death as a proportion of population. That's where the US is really bad. Much worse than South Korea, Germany, etc.
You can't do that. You have
Why
to go,
can't I do that?
You have to go by where. Look, here is the United States. You have to go by the cases. The cases.
Why not as a proportion of
when
population?
We have somebody. What it says is when you have somebody that has where there's a case.
Oh, okay.
The people that live from those cases.
It's surely a relevant statistic to say if the US has X population and X percentage of death of that population versus
because you
South
have to
Korea.
go by the cases.
Well, look at South Korea, for example. 51 million population, 300 deaths. It's like, it's crazy
you don't
compared to...
know that.
I do. It's
You
on
don't
the...
know that.
You think they're faking their statistics, South Korea?
I
An
won't get
advanced
into
country?
that because I have a very good relationship
Yeah.
with the country, but you don't know that. And they have spikes. Look, here's
Germany,
one.
low,
Here's
9,000.
one. Here's one right here, United States. You take the number of cases.
Okay.
Look, we're last, meaning we're first.
Last, I don't know
We
what
have
we're
the
first
best.
in. As a what?
Take a look.
Okay.
Again, it's
I just-
cases.
Okay.
And we have cases because of the testing. Wait.
1,000 Americans are dying a day, but I understand on cases it's different.
No, but you're not reporting it correctly, Jonathan.
I think I am, but...
If you take a look at this other chart, look, this is our testing, I believe. This is the testing, yeah.
Yeah, we do more tests.
No, wait a minute. Well, don't we get credit for that? And because we do more tests, we have more cases. In other words, we test more. We have. Now take a look. The top one. That's a good thing, not a bad thing. The top, Jonathan.
If hospital rates were going down and deaths were going down, I'd say terrific. You deserve to be praised for
Well, they
testing,
don't
but they're
even-
all going
you know,
up.
they very rarely talk-
60,000 Americans are in hospital.
If you watch the
1,000
news
dying
or
a
read the
day.
papers, they usually talk about new cases, new cases, new cases.
I'm talking about death.
Don't move on, stay. That should be the motto of every Trump interviewer now that Jonathan Swan has taught you how to do it. Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan had another lesson for White House reporters last night that they taught on The Daily Show, and that shows just how absurdly useless it is to have this president's cell phone number. Speaking as someone who has never had and has never wanted Donald Trump's cell phone, I could not agree more. We'll be right back. Jonathan Swan gets tonight's last word, and that word is stay. Gotta love that. The 11th hour with Ali Velshi starts now. Hey, Ali, I guess you're going to have some more election updates for us tonight.
I do, and you and I were talking about New York, and of the 4 states with primaries, that felt like the biggest one. But you know what the most fun story was? I just want to show you real quick. It was South Carolina, the gubernatorial runoff, where Donald Trump had endorsed Pamela Abbott, who was the lieutenant governor in the state. But then they started to get numbers that suggested that the challenger, Alan Wilson, was going to win. And then Donald Trump endorsed Alan Wilson, who did win. And Donald Trump put out an announcement. Alan Wilson has won this race, endorsed by Donald Trump. So I guess that's why you get tired of winning, because you endorse all the candidates.
It just made me tired with that one, Ali.
You have a good... Stay up a little bit longer so you watch the show. Have a good evening, Lawrence.
Okay. Thanks.
The 11th hour starts now. All right, let's go to New York, where here's what we know about votes being counted this hour in a huge primary night. For the first time in this election cycle, not one, but 2 Democratic incumbents were ousted by true challengers, not run out by Republican gerrymandering. Both defeated at the hands of insurgent candidates who were backed by New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani. Let's start in, open this up so that you can see Manhattan. Let's start in Manhattan's 10th district in southern Manhattan and Brooklyn. 92% of the vote is in. The Associated Press projects that Brad Lander has defeated Dan Goldman, who is the 2-time incumbent in that district. Brad Lander, because of the nature of these districts, will be the next congressman from New York 10. In New York 7, another Mamdani-endorsed candidate, Claire Valdez, has defeated Antonio Reynoso. This is Lydia Vasquez's old district. She's got 56% of the vote with 94% in. She will be probably the next member of Congress in that district. And again, in District 13 in New York, York. This is northern Manhattan and the Bronx. A third Mamdani-endorsed candidate has won there. Daria Liza Avila Chevalier has beaten Adriano Espaillat. Espaillat is the dean of Latino politics, Democratic politics in New York. He's the head of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus. He has gone down to defeat in that district. And there are many other districts with interesting stories to tell. We are right now 132 days away from the first midterms of Donald Trump's second term. We're following results in these key primary races across 4 states, not just one, that are going to shape the state of the opposition party, the Democrats, in their first nationwide challenge to President Trump's power in November. The results of tonight's elections in Maryland, in South Carolina, in Utah, and especially in New York are going to have tremendous implications for what happens in November and beyond. It's not just about whether Democrats have the ability to snatch back control of one or both chambers of Congress. It's a referendum on the first 2 years of the president's term, a first chance for real accountability. Do you want to know how high the stakes are? Just ask Donald Trump. This is what he told Republicans it would mean for him if Republicans lose control of Capitol Hill.
You got to win the midterms, because if we don't win the midterms, it's just going to be, I mean, they'll find a reason to impeach me. I'll get impeached.
I'll get impeached. In the 18 months since Donald Trump took the reins of the federal government, he's taken this country for a ride it didn't sign up for. He's launched a war that he said he would not launch. His policies have raised the cost of living instead of lowering it, and he's weaponized a justice system that he claims was weaponized against him. As Trump fully admitted in that clip you just heard, he fears accountability. And that is precisely what this year's elections are all about, an opportunity for the American people to reclaim some amount of power to restrain Donald Trump's anti-democratic ambitions. Every single primary race between now and November will give us a better sense of how that's going to play out, which brings us back to New York. The state of New York has 26 districts, almost none of which will change hands in November, except perhaps for one. New York's 17th congressional district, which offers Democrats one of their best chances of flipping a Republican seat to Democratic this year. It's currently held by the Republican Mike Lawler. But there's another intriguing dynamic unfolding in the state that's worth keeping an eye on, because it will shape the future of the Democratic Party and how it'll function as an opposition party during the second half of Donald Trump's term. And that fight is happening in the heart of New York City in 3 safe Democratic districts, where the city's mayor, Zohran Mamdani, has tested his influence in federal elections for the first time, just 6 months into his tenure. His chosen slate of congressional candidates is small, but they have the opportunity of shaking up the Democratic Party in a big way. Brad Lander's decisive win over Dan Goldman in New York 10 tonight makes Goldman the first Democratic incumbent to be ousted so far this election cycle by a true outside primary challenger. The only other 2 Dems who've lost in primaries were driven out by Republican gerrymandering in Texas, in which they ran against one another or one against a former incumbent. Moments ago, Goldman delivered his concession speech and offered this reminder.
Let's remember, the enemy to all that we want and all that we hope for is in the White House, not in our own party.
Less than an hour ago, Adriano Espaillat, the dean of the New York Latino politics and the head of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, became the second Democratic incumbent to go down to defeat at the hands of an outside challenger. He lost his race to Daria Liza Avila Chevalier, also backed by Mamdani. Meanwhile, Claire Valdez's victory in New York's 7th congressional district gave Mamdani 3 victories out of 3 and solidified his influence in this moment in time on New York City politics. Again, none of these districts will change hands. The Democrats who won in New York tonight will almost entirely become members of Congress for their districts. But who is driving Democratic politics, Democratic Party politics in November has huge implications, not just for Democrats, but for the whole country. Because the struggles for control of Congress is not just Republican versus Democrat, it's also about progressives versus moderates, outsiders versus the establishment, and crucially, who can actually win in November? And that's what tonight's elections are going to help us unravel. So let's get to it. Joining me for the hour to unpack tonight's results, Puck contributor Abby Livingston, former New York Congressman Max Rose. He represented New York's 11th district, covering all of Staten Island and parts of southern Brooklyn. Former New York Congressman Mondaire Jones. He represented New York's previous 17th district, which saw significant changes after redistricting in 2022. And Charlotte Alter, journalist, author of the New Humanism Project on Substack. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here on such an important night. And Congressman, I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to ask you first, because there are a lot of people who don't live in New York and may not care about what happened here, especially since virtually none of these districts will change hands. Only one in the entire state is likely to change hands. Why is this important this night?
Look, the most important outcome tonight was the Democratic primary in my old district, the 17th congressional district. Obviously, it's very different now post 2 cycles of redistricting in the past 4 years than it was at the time I represented it. Otherwise, I'd still be in Congress right now. There's a Republican in that district. And
that's Mike Lawler.
That's Mike Lawler.
And he's what you might think of these days as a moderate Republican.
He is someone, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people, that a lot of folks in the press sort of give credit to as being a moderate, despite his voting record being lockstep with Donald Trump. He has succeeded in a way few others have at convincing people of the lie that he is somehow independent of Donald Trump. But what we saw tonight in the statement that he issued after the primary election result is a challenge of Kate Conley, now the Democratic nominee, to 6 different debates following the July 4th holiday. That is not the posture of someone who is feeling confident about his prospects in the general election. He's clearly got polling showing that he is vulnerable to defeat against Kate Conley.
And we've seen that. Max Rose, we don't describe your old district as being in play. But you did represent it not that long ago. Talk to me about what this night means to you. I suspect you might be a little worried about the direction the Democratic Party took in New York tonight.
Well, I mean, first of all, I know what Kate Conley is going through right now. I remember winning my primary in 2018 and thinking, you know, shows like this would talk about me, and then AOC wins her primary that night too, and I'm like, no one ever heard about Max Rose that night. You're welcome. So we have to make sure we're talking about Kate Connolly,
because she might be the only flip
ahead, because it's the Kate Connollys that are a pathway to Hakeem Jeffries becoming Speaker, and we should not forget that. And Kate will not be inviting one of the 3 Mamdani endorsed individuals who won their primary. She will not be inviting one of them to campaign with her in her swing district. So we should always remember those dynamics. But with that being said, though, let's also highlight those individuals who lost their races today. No one can claim that Antonio Reynoso, Adriano Espaillat, or Dan Goldman were not leading progressives. These were not moderates by any sense of the word here. So this is something very different that's happening in the Democratic Party that's far more, I don't know if it's associated with vibes, I don't know if it's associated with Israel, but someone drew a line in the sand. DSA drew a line in the sand in these races and said, you're not with us. And that's really what caused this.
So you are worried a little bit.
I wouldn't say that I'm worried about the general elections because we're continuing to nominate people in swing districts that can and will win. That's really all I care about.
So, Abby, Max says that that Kate Conley will help Hakeem Jeffries become Speaker. I think, I'm not sure, but I think all 3 of the Mamdani endorsed candidates tonight have said that's actually on the table, whether Mamdani or Schumer. Some have said they will not support either of them. Obviously, there are no Senate candidates tonight. How's this playing in Washington?
I think the most important thing to think about is that winning the House might be the easier step for Leader Jeffries. And so most party leaders build their support based on their state delegations. And to have some folks in his district or in his city who he didn't support means they don't have personal loyalty to him. So whether it's the Speaker's vote or future votes, it's going to be hard for him to count votes with the margin. And the reason is because of this Republican redistricting. This should be a very big year for Democrats, but this redistricting has shrunk it. So Hakeem Jeffries may have the same kinds of problems that Speaker Mike Johnson has had in getting his rebels in line on the big votes.
And later on, we're going to talk about what it will take for Democrats to win back the House. Charlotte Alter, Dan Goldman made a point in his remarks, and he said the enemy is not within. I happen to take the view that debates like these are healthy for a political party if you'd like to actually function as a political party in a big tent. Some take a view that this is damaging to Democrats at a time that they have to win back the House.
Listen, I think that you can't separate what happened tonight from what's been happening in New York City for the last 6 months, which is a kind of Mamdani honeymoon, a Mamdani moon. People in this city love Zohran Mamdani. Look at the way people poured into the streets when the Knicks won. Look at the way the city has felt different in the last couple months since he's been mayor, at a time when the rest of the country feels like it's falling apart. So I think I agree with my co-panelists here. I know that this is going to have a huge impact on what's happening in Washington. I think it's going to, say a lot about the direction of the party. But I also want us to pause on this night and recognize that what happened tonight is related to the way that politics in New York City has changed. And that's actually a very positive story for Democrats. It's one of the most positive stories for Democrats in the country because people are really happy with how things are going in this city. Mamdani's approval rate is like near 80%. The vibes are good in a moment where almost everywhere else the vibes are really bad.
Can I make a caveat to that?
Yeah.
If we have time. So that plus people still think very poorly of the Democratic Party's brand. And you had 2 incumbent Democratic members of Congress who were viewed to be part of the establishment, insufficiently leading on a number of issues that matter to the specific electorates in their respective districts. And I think that did play a role when faced with dynamic, oftentimes younger challengers, not always, oftentimes younger challengers who were speaking to the moment, if you will, of this just outrage, not just at Republicans in Washington, but at Democrats who a lot of folks perceive to not be fighting sufficiently hard enough.
Hold that thought. We're going to come back in just a moment with Abby Livingston, Max Rose, Mondaire Jones, and Charlotte Alter. We got a lot more to talk about. Coming up, our MS Now teams are standing by at the primary night watch parties for the candidates in one of the major races that we were watching tonight, New York's 13th district, where the Mamdani-backed candidate Daria Liza Avila Chevalier unseated incumbent Democrat Congressman Adriano Espaillat. That's next. All right, we've got reporters tonight covering one of the more important and contentious primary races. It took place in New York's 13th district. That is northern Manhattan and the Bronx. The Mamdani-backed candidate, Daria Liza Avila Chevalier, unseated the incumbent Democratic Congressman Adriano Espaillat, making this the 3rd Mamdani endorsee to win tonight. MS Now's Will McDuffie is at the Avila Chevalier watch party. MS Now's Michael Schnell is at the Espaillat watch party. Michael, let me start with you. What was the feeling there as this developed? Because for a while, Espaillat was in the lead earlier in the evening.
Yeah, Ali, the excitement here was palpable when I first arrived. Again, this is an Upper Manhattan, Bronx district. It was palpable. There were supporters here very excited. There was a Dominican dance team and a Dominican band that was practicing outside, preparing for a performance. And then once the results started to roll in, and then more of them, and then more of them, the mood here changed. And by the time we heard from Congressman Adriano Espaillat and he conceded the race, there were tears falling from the eyes of some of his supporters. This is a crushing loss for Adriano Espaillat. He's a nearly 10-year incumbent in the House. He's the chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the first ever Dominican-American individual to serve in the House. And it's a big loss for him here, but in the same vein, it's a massive victory for Zohran Mamdani. As you mentioned, this victory tonight in New York's 13th Congressional District completed his trifecta of a sweep in these House elections, ones that he had been endorsing in. And I asked Congressman Espaillat about that because this is personal for somebody like Adriano Espaillat. Last year, when Mamdani was on the ballot for mayor, Espaillat had initially endorsed Andrew Cuomo in that race. But when Cuomo had lost the primary, Espaillat then got behind Zohran Mamdani. I asked him, given that eventual support, what he made of the mayor endorsing against him. This is what he told me, again, minutes after that concession speech. What's your message to Mayor Mamdani? You endorsed him after Governor Cuomo had lost, and then he endorsed against you. What's your message to him after this defeat tonight?
No, he decided to endorse my opponent. I respect the mayor's decision. I accept what happened tonight with elegancy.
Ali, again, this may be a loss for Espaillat here in New York 13, but it does raise massive implications and questions for the greater Democratic Party. First off, what's a progressive in this party? And I don't mean it in a flippant way, but Adriano Espaillat was considered more of a progressive figure on Capitol Hill. In this race, he was the establishment figure. A lot of questions for the party moving forward.
Yeah, those are good questions, Michael. Thank you. Will McDuffie is at the Avila Chevalier campaign, and of course that turned around. Initially, the way it works in New York is the first results you get tend to be advance ballots, and then you get day of. And as soon as the day of ballots started coming in, we started to see Avila Chevalier taking the lead.
Yeah, Ali, supporters here were able to cheer pretty early on for Brad Lander. Of course, he was one of Mamdani's other endorsed candidates. A little bit later, they were able to cheer when Claire Valdez was announced. But this one took a little bit longer. And like you said, it was close as soon as results started coming in. The early vote, and then slowly Avila Chevalier ended up pulling away. And, you know, this is a race that Democratic Socialists were nervous about, because early on in the early voting period, they were seeing numbers of young voters not showing up in the way that they did last year for Mamdani. And the New York City chapter of the DSA actually called multiple emergency meetings last week just to get more canvassers out there in this district and in New York 7. And I just spoke to one of the co-chairs of DSA, and she said it paid off, and they saw canvassers show up in the last days of early voting. And this was a candidate, Ali, in Avila Chevalier, who was probably the biggest hurdle for DSA and Mamdani to climb in order to get a win tonight. She was a 32-year-old, has never run for elected office. She had a trove of tweets that were liabilities, including one that said F Kamala Harris, called Joe Biden a rapist. I met a voter in East Harlem this weekend who said that in itself turned him off of her. But so many people I spoke to at the polls also told me that they came out for her because of Mamdani and because of the support of the mayor and because they wanted to see the party go further left, Alan.
Michael and Will, thank you both for your coverage tonight. We appreciate it. MS Now's Michael Schnell and Will McDuffie. All right, coming down, I'm going to break down the math behind what we've been talking about, the Democratic path to taking control of the House, and exactly how tonight's results are going to shape what's to come in November. Tonight's primaries are shaping the path to the midterms, giving us more insight into what voters are looking for with control of Congress in play. Right now, Republicans' grip on the House in particular is paper thin. The current margin is 218 Republicans and one independent who caucuses with Republicans, who used to be a Republican until a few months ago, Kevin Kiley in California, versus 212 Democrats, plus 4 vacancies, 3 of which were held by Democrats. So assume that the vacancies fall where they were. If this were a normal year, given that margin, Democrats would need to flip 3 seats in November to win control of the House. But because of a Republican advantage in the gerrymandering wars, Democrats now need to flip at least 5 seats. Now, of the 5 they need to flip, Democrats think they've got their best shot in 14 Republican-held districts. All of them are rated as toss-ups. The DCCC, which is the House Democrats' campaign arm, says it's targeting 20 districts that they think they can flip, including some where Trump won by double digits in 2024. Remember, whether it's 14 or 20, Dems need just 5 to win back the House. Back with me is my panel, Abby Livingston, Max Rose, Mondaire Jones, and Charlotte Alter. Abby, you follow this stuff. This math really animates Washington. Obviously, you'd like to have more than 5 if you were a Democrat who were trying to win the House back. But talk to me about the math. Looks very favorable for Democrats.
It looks favorable. It would be much better without the redistricting that had happened. But there's still a sense that this wave is coming and that Trump's approvals are so plummeting that this thing could really blow open. Now, Democrats have done what you're supposed to do in the off year, which is get candidates in place. They haven't gotten everyone they wanted through these House races, but they've gotten quite a few. And so it's called getting surfboards in candidates' hands to prepare for the wave. And so I think now it's just sort of a test to see how much Trump goes down in the polling and what the generic ballot is in the fall.
Max, talk to me about this, because you live in that kind of space where you've had to go into a district that wasn't necessarily favorable to you and were able to win at some point. What does that look like?
I think it would be a gigantic mistake for the Democrats to look at this right now as a moderate versus progressive dichotomy, where you have to pick one or the other.
You pick who makes sense in your district.
Yeah, but it's also someone can excite the base and persuade at the same time.
Right.
Right? It's not, we can have candidates who support Medicare for all. We can have candidates who believe in abolishing ICE. We can have candidates who believe in addressing skyrocketing wealth inequality. What we can't have is candidates who care more about vibing on social media by pushing the Overton window than they do about winning. Right? So that needs to be where everyone's focus is. And politics at this point is a team sport. And we're actually in a really interesting point for the Democrats where they don't have to make too many difficult choices. They just have to vociferously stand up to Donald Trump and not say any crazy stuff. Fingers crossed they can do that.
Mondare, tell me about your take on what has to happen. Because, right, the math generally supports Democrats taking the House at this point. Max's warning notwithstanding, what do you think Democrats have to do?
Look, I listened to particularly the last thing you just said about how all you have to do is not be the Republicans and stand up to these guys, and that will be enough. And I'm just thinking of all the people who would disagree with that. They say, you got to stand for something. You got to make the affirmative case for electing Democrats. And of course, that's true as well. But it really is the history of elections in this country, that when you've got an unpopular president, the party trying to at least take back control of Congress in the event that there's currently unified control of government, really does have to just not make mistakes in order to accomplish that in the fall. And so I do hope that people don't do what Max just alluded to, which is, go so far to the left for purposes of scoring ideological points within the party and make themselves really vulnerable in a general election where you have to convince independents and maybe even Republicans to vote across party lines for you as a Democrat.
So, Charlotte, let's examine this a little bit. You were talking about Zohran Mamdani's almost 80% approval rating. That was mostly in a poll in New York 10, where Brad Lander won by kind of almost those numbers. I mean, he's got 2/3 of the votes there. His approval rating across the city is a little bit lower, but generally higher than most mayors enjoy. And some of that is vibes, and some of that is young people. And some of that, the exit polls after he won indicated that most young people who voted for him were not associating with his ideology. They were associating with being able to afford a place to live.
And also, they were associating with, he seems like a fun, cool guy. Like, he had a lightness about him. He had a happy warrior energy about him. And to Max's point, which I completely agree with about this isn't necessarily about progressive versus moderate, I completely agree with everything you said about like needing to both rally the base and persuade. But I think one place where we would disagree is that I don't think that needs to only come from the moderate side of the party. I think that Mamdani has shown that you can be a progressive and persuade people who don't agree with a lot of your politics to vote for you anyway because they like you as a person. And I think that that is essentially what happened here in New York when last year when he was elected is, I think you can look at tonight and say this is a victory for the Democratic Socialists of America. You can say it's the Commie Corridor, New York is socialist. I don't know that I totally agree with that. I think that this victory tonight in New York for Mamdani is a testament to his personal popularity and the way that New Yorkers feel about him personally. It's almost similar to the way some Republicans feel about Donald Trump, that he can just handpick his candidates and people are going to vote for them no matter what kinds of stuff they say, no matter what their old tweets say, no matter if they necessarily agree with their ideology or not.
I was talking to Zohran Mamdani last night about that, and every time I was trying to talk about Brad Lander or something else, he was going back to Avila Chevalier because I think he understood that was going to be where his big challenge was, and it was there. Abby, you were talking about how the party picks candidates, and about a month ago I was speaking with Hakeem Jeffries and talking about should these primaries be about everybody getting to vote for the future of their party, and he said yes,
but the party always supports incumbents. I think some of this is a reaction to the party putting its thumb on the scale. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's a stability thing. The party has always done that, and that is to keep incumbents invested in the campaign arm. And these incumbents have to raise hundreds of thousands of dollars to help the effort with the national campaign. And if they feel like that the party's not going to support them when they're in trouble, they're going to be a lot less enthusiastic about that or just partaking in the future.
Well, where do you think about that, Mondaire, this idea? Because I think there are some people who have a bit of a throw the bums out. Mostly that amongst Democrats applies to Republicans. But we're seeing in more than just these races tonight, people saying, as you mentioned, they think some of the Democrats are establishment.
Yeah, look, I think one of the things that progressives get right so clearly is in their focus on the economic inequality in this country. It is outrageous. The fact that the super rich, the billionaires, and apparently now the trillionaires, if you're Elon Musk, are just sort of consolidating power, not just financial, but political and otherwise. It is an outrage. It is a moral stain on the history of this country and on our system of governance. And you do not see typically a lot of people, even within the Democratic Party, I think, giving sufficient attention to that. And that is how people like Zoran sort of electrify the base of the Democratic Party and get independents and even Republicans to vote. I'm thinking back to, AOC did back in 2024 after that presidential election. She was on the ballot and she asked people, why did you vote for Donald Trump but vote for me at the same time, right? And there were people who talked about how they appreciated her character. They trusted her. She was talking about, how screwed up the world is, and she was speaking to them in a way that they didn't feel the other Democratic candidates have been speaking to them.
I'm going to ask you all to hang around, stay with me. Coming up, Democrats aren't being shy about their plans and priorities if they do retake the House in November, and holding Trump and his administration to account is right at the top of their list. What's at stake for the president if his party loses Congress is next. Back with me is my incredible panel: Abby Livingston, Max Rose, Mondaire Jones, and Charlotte Alter. Zoran Mamdani is at the Avila Chevalier victory party right now. Let's listen for a couple of minutes.
So please, join me in welcoming. And I want a fellow member of New York City DSA, an Afro-Latina woman, the first Dominican woman to represent this district, and the next Congresswoman from New York 13, Daria Lisa Avila Chevalier.
All right, we're gonna monitor that speech for you. We'll put it in the corner of the TV for the moment. I've got a few minutes left to talk to my panel about this. Max Rose, you said something earlier about how Democrats should not think about these things in terms of progressive versus moderate. And you even mentioned that, whether some of this is a Jewish thing. How does this go forward from here? Because right now, tonight in New York City, we have arguments in that district that are between a Dominican Latino community and the black community in northern Manhattan. We've got New York 10, which was a battle between two Jewish guys, but they definitely disagreed. Israel was central to that discussion. There are a lot of fault lines right now. But Dan Goldman did say, I remember this from this night, when he said, our fight is inside the White House, not with each other.
Absolutely.
How does the party move ahead now?
And kudos to Dan Goldman for saying that. Right, for taking this moment to be a real leader. I think would actually highlight AOC and the way that she has served as a member of Congress for the past few years. She's done so with certainly putting forth bold policies, but at the same time, she has practiced true political empathy and she has looked at the bigger picture, building alliances for the long term here. Ultimately, people will know how to win their own individual districts. We have to still believe in that as a party, but we do need North Stars to your point earlier, make sure that folks are still leaning towards not just running against something, but running for something. The only thing I would continue to caution folks around, right? Just think about this. Earlier, I said we can be a party in tough districts that supports Medicare for all, supports abolish ICE, and then someone else says, but, you know, what about being a leftist? Just a couple years ago, they used to call that radical. At one point or another, as a party, we can say, let's draw the chalk line and unify around things that are bold, but nonetheless, we can win on them. That's not something we should be scared of as a party either.
Charlotte, what's your take on that?
I agree with Max, and I also think that part of this is also about the attitudes towards difference and whether these new progressive, new socialist members of Congress feel that they can work productively with fellow members of Congress who may agree with them on some things but not on others. And that's, I think, one place where Mamdani has really set a very powerful example for his fellow Democratic Socialists in his working relationship with Kathy Hochul, where they have many areas of disagreement, and he could have come in and said, I'm fighting Kathy Hochul, the big bad establishment, and he didn't do that. He said, we'll handle that later. Let's find places where we can work together where our priorities align.
Right.
And so I'm going to be really watching to see whether these new members of Congress take that attitude. It doesn't require compromising their values, but it does require reshifting their priorities away from conflict and towards collaboration.
I do want to make the point that Brad Lander is not a member of the DSA.
That's correct.
And he still
was.
He
and
was,
then he stepped away.
But no longer,
Yeah,
right? And in fact, it had something to do with the response from the New York City chapter of the DSA to the events of October 7th.
That's right.
So this is not just a story of DSA.
Yeah.
This is a story of the perception of voters in the Democratic primary in those respective districts that the incumbent was inferior in some way, shape, or form, whether it be on a specific policy or multiple policies, or just in terms of the passion that they brought or lack thereof to the fight in this moment, this critical moment in the midnight hour. And that also matters too, right? Voters have to be able to have a choice. I mean, that is the nature of democracy, and I think we need to respect that. I say this as someone who began my congressional career as a primary challenger before my 82-year-old incumbent decided not to seek re-election 3 months into that campaign. And then it became this sort of sprawling Democratic primary up in the old 17th congressional district. And people were looking for a new voice with fresh ideas and a kind of passion, frankly, that hadn't been there for a while.
I think that there have been two forces that have helped Democrats stay together in the Trump era, and one is Trump himself, that they're all in the boat together and they tolerate each other's differences, and the other is Nancy Pelosi. And both are fading forces. Next term will be the first term that Democrats have not had Pelosi in the background to enforce discipline. And so I think so much of this will matter on who the Democratic nominee, who none of us know who that's going to be, and does that person have an Obama-like skill set to bring the entire party together, or are there going to be sore feelings after this Democratic nomination next term?
Hey, this issue of Hakeem Jeffries, this is not a great night for him, but that's okay because he's still going to have the same number of seats. There's no seat in New York that that Hakeem Jeffries and Dorsey lost that is going to become a Republican seat. So these will still be people, if he becomes a speaker, who are in his area. What does he need to do? He's going to have a tough go. If they don't win 15 or 20 extra seats, it'll be tough to be the leader of any party.
I always hate disagreeing with you because you might not invite me back. But you know,
a standing invitation always,
thanks,
Max.
I appreciate it, buddy. But there's no way, shape, and form this was a bad night for Hakeem Jeffries. Hakeem Jeffries proved yet again that when you are an incumbent Democrat, he will go to the mat for you.
Right.
And tomorrow morning, the Democratic caucus will remain united in terms of presenting a bold agenda and standing up to Donald Trump and MAGA fascism. Hakeem Jeffries remains an incredible leader of this caucus at a time when it needs exactly that. There's not one elected member of Congress right now that tomorrow will look at him as anything but a very strong leader.
You know, I think is an excellent example of someone who won a primary challenge and went on to just be a very sophisticated actor, a teammate to the rest of the House Democratic Caucus. AOC. I mean, she is all in on making sure that we take back the House. And so if other newer members of the New York congressional delegation just follow that example, I think we will be in a great place, and we will have a Speaker Hakeem Jeffries in January of next year.
And are you satisfied that issue will go away? Because there are a lot of these new candidates who say they are not sure that they will support Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker. Is this not a really relevant conversation right now?
They'll learn real quick.
You know, when it comes to committee assignments and all the other ways that people can exert power, you know, there is a strategy to withholding that support. Until it becomes untenable. And so it's just about sort of effectively navigating that, having those conversations, developing a relationship. I think it's perfectly fine for somebody on the night of their primary victory to say, let me see who's even going to be up. Now, we know that that person is going to be Hakeem Jeffries. And he's going to be the next Speaker of the House. And so if they don't know that now, they'll learn that.
You are all wonderful. Thank you for being here tonight. These are tough things to unpack, and I couldn't have asked for a better team to do it. Thank you to all of you. Abby Livingston, Max Rose, who, as I said, has a standing invitation to the show at all times. Wandera Jones also, and our old friend Charlotte Alter. Thank you to all of you. Make sure to join me on Wednesday, tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, for my YouTube show, It's Happening. Each week, I'm joined by a special guest. We're going to take an in-depth look at the biggest stories across politics, business, and the economy, and we'll answer your questions live on air. You can send me your questions about anything, anytime. Velshi@ms.now. All right, coming up, the Nightlight brings us to another primary night in Brooklyn, and a light that's been carried through generations. That's next. Sometimes a light is carried through generations. Probably wasn't one of the races you were following closely tonight, but Yvette Clarke, the daughter of Jamaican immigrants and chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, won her primary in New York's 9th district by a long shot. In what was largely this same district, in these same primaries back in 1968, a black woman from Brooklyn climbed into a sound truck and drove it through the housing projects of Bedford-Stuyvesant. She had no party machine behind her, no party bosses, no national name, just a truck with a microphone and something to say. Her name was Shirley Chisholm, and she is tonight's Nightlight. From the speakers of her sound truck, ladies and gentlemen, this is Fighting Shirley Chisholm coming through. She won that primary against the machine by 800 votes. They laughed at her then. They laughed at her again 4 years later when she walked into the 1972 Democratic National Convention as a candidate for President of the United States, the first black woman ever to seek the nomination of a major party. The bosses didn't take her seriously. The press didn't take her seriously. Some of her own allies didn't take her seriously. She ran anyway. She won 152 delegates, and she stood at that podium. Her slogan was 3 words: unbought and unbossed. What Shirley Chisholm understood, and what the people who laughed at her did not understand, is that a primary is an act of defiance. It is the moment when ordinary people get to set the terms before power does, before the machine decides who's next in line. She didn't run because she thought she'd win. She ran because someone had to go first. Decades later, the women who came after her in Brooklyn, in Congress, in presidential campaigns, have said her name out loud as the reason they believed it was possible for them. Not because she won every race, but because she refused to wait for permission. Tonight, the district that she broke open went to the polls again. Different number on the map, same streets, same idea. Shirley Chisholm said she didn't want to be remembered as the first black woman elected to Congress. She wanted to be remembered as a woman who had guts. Unbought, unbossed, and tonight, very much unforgotten. Tonight's 11th hour is done. Tomorrow starts right now.